Chapter 1882. The cold and majestic voice was still echoing in the main hall. Qin Shan was so angry that his face was distorted, and his eyes were filled with rage. "Bastard! You're still wet behind the ears. How dare you humiliate my master?" After scolding him, he glared at Huanglong Daoist and shouted, "Huanglong Daoist, did you bring this person here today to humiliate me? If that's the case, don't say that I'm not giving you face. I'm going to teach him a lesson and make him kneel down and apologize." At the same time, Qin Shan suddenly waved both of his palms and blasted out two flaming fists toward Ji Tianqing. The strength of a Tribulation Stage 7th Stage cultivator was on full display at that moment. The raging flaming fists contained destructive power. However, they were so concentrated that they did not hurt the tables and chairs in the main hall. Ji Tianqing sat on the big chair calmly. He did not even raise his hand to block the attack. Huanglong Daoist had already raised his left arm. With a wave of his wide Taoist robe, he kept the two flaming fists in his sleeve. The flames were extinguished instantly. The destructive power was easily neutralized by Huanglong Daoist. He looked at Ji Tianqing with anticipation and asked nervously, "Master, I've been practicing the heaven and earth in the sleeve technique that you taught me back then for thousands of years. What do you think?" Ji Tianqing nodded slightly and said calmly, "You're 70% as good as me. You've reached the peak of perfection. However, you're still a distance away from perfection. It's not something that can be achieved through hard work. You also need some talent and comprehension." Huanglong Daoist looked satisfied and said excitedly, "Thank you for your compliment, Master. I know that I'm not very talented. I'm very lucky to be able to reach 70% as good as you." The master and disciple were discussing secret techniques in a serious manner. Qin Shan was already dumbfounded by what he saw. He was completely confused. These two fellows, why are they doing this? Old Taoist Huang Long is calling that kid master? Am I hallucinating, or have they all gone mad? Qin Shan felt dizzy and his mind went blank. His brain was not enough to process what was happening. At this moment, Huanglong Daoist glared at him and scolded, "Qin Shan, what are you waiting for? Go get Zhao Guiyuan. Don't blame me for not warning you. If you dare to play any tricks, the Guiyuan sect will perish today." Qin Shan was shocked and angry at the same time. He was so angry that his whole body was trembling, and his face had turned purple. However, the Huanglong Daoist had a murderous look on his face. He was definitely not joking. This was a martial sage. If he really went crazy, even if he couldn't destroy the Guiyuan sect, he could still destroy this mountain. Thinking of this, Qin Shan could only temporarily suppress his anger. He turned around and went through the secret door in the corner of the hall, running into the depths of the palace. After passing through several winding corridors, he followed a secret passage and arrived in front of a secret room underground. The door of the secret chamber was tightly shut, and a sealing array was set up. Qin Shan hesitated for a moment, then gritted his teeth and made up his mind. He waved his hand and shot out rays of golden light, knocking on the door of the secret room. "Master, disciple Qin Shan wishes to see you. Something big has happened." After a while, an old voice came from the secret room, filled with anger. "Qin Shan? What is so urgent that you have to come knocking on my door?" Qin Shan did not dare to hide anything and hurriedly reported, "Master, the Huanglong Daoist from Tianzhu Mountain suddenly came. He actually rode on a black dragon and brought along a young man in a white robe." The old voice became even angrier and shouted impatiently, "Bastard! What yellow dragon, black dragon, young man in a white robe? What kind of nonsense is this? Don't you know that I announced that I was going into seclusion to avoid the matter at Tianzhu Mountain? I have already warned you that no matter how much the Tianzhu Mountain begged, our sect was not to send troops to help. Otherwise, a disaster would befall us." Qin Shan hurriedly bowed and apologized. He hurriedly explained, Master, of course I understand what you mean. However, today's situation is too special. The Huanglong Taoist came aggressively. The moment he entered the hall, he knocked out 2 elders and wanted to talk to me alone. Moreover, the Huanglong Taoist was very respectful to the young man in a white robe. He respectfully addressed him as master and behaved like a disciple. The young man in a white robe was also very domineering and arrogant. He said that the Tianzhu mountain had saved our sect many years ago. Now that our sect was ungrateful, he had to come personally to take back his righteousness. He even insulted Master and said that you had knelt in front of him many years ago. Qin Shan was filled with righteous indignation and emotionally recounted what had happened. However, he did not realize that the old voice in the secret room had not moved for a long time. After a long time, Qin Shan finished recounting the entire incident. He then regained his senses and hurriedly asked, "Master, are you listening?" The secret room was still silent and there was no movement. Qin Shan furrowed his brows and muttered to himself, "Sigh, Master must have fallen asleep again. No, I have to enter the secret room and explain it to him personally." As he spoke, he stretched out his hand to pull the door knocker of the secret room. At this moment, the door of the secret room opened with a bang. The sudden huge force forced Qin Shan to take 5 steps back before he could regain his balance. He only saw a blur in front of his eyes before a figure in a white robe rushed out crazily. At the same time, a pair of steel-like hands grabbed his shoulders. "What did you just say?" The Huanglong Taoist called the young man in a white robe master? The young man in a white robe called himself master? They were even talking about the heaven and earth sleeve? A skinny old man with white hair was grabbing Qin Shan's neck with both his hands. His eyes were wide open and he lost control of his emotions as he shouted. Qin Shan's eyes rolled back. He hurriedly pried the old man's hands away and took a few steps back. "Master! Master, what's wrong with you?" The white-haired old man in a white robe was the previous sect leader, Zhao Guiyuan. He stared at Qin Shan with a horrified expression and roared emotionally, "Tell me quickly! Did you see everything just now with your own eyes? Did the young man in a white robe really say that I had knelt at his feet and vowed to be loyal to the Tianzhu mountain forever? That fellow, what did he look like?" Qin Shan nodded his head repeatedly. He thought for a while and gestured with his hands. That young man in a white robe was very handsome and powerful. One look and you could tell that he was not an ordinary person. He was 8 feet tall and wore a white robe and a pair of black cloth shoes. His face was handsome and cold. His eyes were like stars and his eyebrows were like swords. Zhao Guiyuan was completely stunned. He stared at Qin Shan in a daze and shook his head repeatedly. He muttered, "This is impossible. It can't be him. How can there be such a miracle in the world? He had clearly been dead for 1,000 years. How can he still be alive?" Qin Shan gradually calmed down. When he saw his master in a frenzy, he suddenly thought of something and his expression changed drastically. The master of the Huanglong Taoist? Isn't that the grandmaster of the Tianzhu mountain? Jian Kenshin? After a long while, Zhao Guiyuan took a deep breath and suppressed his shock. He asked in a deep voice, "Qin Shan, think carefully. What else did the young man in a white robe say?" Qin Shan hesitated for a while and stammered. He said, "You kneel. Kneel when you enter the main hall." Hearing this, Zhao Guiyuan's body suddenly stiffened and he let out a mournful sigh. "It's him. It must be him. Only he has the right to be so domineering." Qin Shan frowned and asked with a strange expression, "Master, could it be that the young man in a white robe is really Kenshin? You really want to kneel when you enter the main hall?" Zhao Guiyuan smiled bitterly. His eyes were filled with despair as he said in a low voice, "Although this sounds unbelievable, the Huanglong Taoist would never be wrong. If that young man in a white robe is really Kenshin, It's still not too late for me to kneel now. Chapter 1883. The Guiyuan Hall was completely silent. Ji Tianqing and Huanglong Daoist sat on large chairs, patiently waiting. Ji Bai and Shohei stood by the wall, continuing to act as statues. The two purple-robed elders were still lying in the main hall, unconscious. Not long after, hurried footsteps could be heard from the secret door in the corner of the hall. The white-haired Zhao Guiyuan rushed into the hall with a flustered expression, but he immediately stopped in his tracks. He took a deep breath and suppressed his nervous heart, trying his best to remain calm. As he tidied up his appearance, he anxiously looked towards the left side of the hall. His gaze swept past Huanglong Daoist and immediately landed on Ji Tianqing's body. At the same time, Ji Tianqing also raised his eyes and looked at him indifferently. Zhao Guiyuan clearly saw Ji Tianqing's face, and he also saw the coldness and dignity in his deep eyes. Zhao Guiyuan's body immediately stiffened, as if his entire body had been petrified. Although more than 1,000 years had passed, Zhao Guiyuan's memories of Kenshin had become somewhat blurry. However, when he saw Ji Tianqing gradually overlapped with the Kenshin in his memories. That figure, appearance, temperament, even the expression in his eyes were exactly the same, without a single difference. It's him. It really is him. Zhao Guiyuan's body trembled, and his heart was filled with incomparable horror. His eyes were also covered with a thick layer of reverence. 1,000 years ago, Kenshin's glory had enveloped the entire Shenwu continent, overshadowing everyone in the world, including the three martial gods. The reverence for Kenshin had long been deeply ingrained in every martial artist's soul. Even after 1,000 years, that reverence would still appear. Zhao Guiyuan was stunned in place, and his expression became complicated. The white beard on his lower jaw also trembled. He was now certain that the white-robed youth was Kenshin. This left him at a loss, and he was completely at a loss as to what to do. Ever since Kenshin had ascended, Zhao Guiyuan had been standing for more than 1,000 years. He was already used to standing. He was used to the title of Guiyuan sect master and his dignity. How difficult would it be to make him kneel now? His heart was struggling, hesitating, weighing. Qin Shan, who was standing behind him, could clearly feel the change in his emotions. His heart was also filled with anger and humiliation. For a moment, both sides were in a stalemate. Ji Tianqing didn't say anything. He stared coldly at Zhao Guiyuan and slowly raised his right palm. He opened his palm, and a 5-colored brilliance lit up. It broke through the dome of the main hall and flew into the mountain-protecting formation in the sky. Then, the 10 directions origin-returning formation that enveloped the entire origin-returning mountain sped up and released a destructive power. Rumble! Following a muffled explosion, the entire origin mountain began to tremble and shake violently. It was as if a super-earthquake had arrived. Cracks began to appear on the mountain, and countless rocks fell from the mountain walls. Many of the palaces and mansions on the mountain peak were also shaking violently. Cracks began to appear on their surface, and countless tiles fell to the ground. Even the ground in the origin returning hall began to crack. Many rocks and pillars fell from the dome and smashed into the hall. Ji Tianqing and Huanglong Daoist sat there without moving. They were as steady as Mount Tai. However, Origin Returning Mountain was going through a calamity. The entire mountain peak was about to collapse. At this rate, the entire Origin Returning sect would be destroyed in at most an hour. Zhao Guiyuan and Qin Shan were both dumbfounded. Both of them widened their eyes, revealing an incomparably terrified and anxious expression. Zhao Guiyuan couldn't care less about his dignity and humiliation anymore. He knelt on the ground and kowtowed. "Your subordinate, Zhao Guiyuan, welcomes Senior Kenshin's arrival." Like a chick pecking at rice, he kowtowed 3 times in a row in fear and trepidation. Qin Shan had no choice but to kneel and kowtow like Zhao Guiyuan. At this moment, all dignity and honor were thrown out of the window. They were not as important as origin returning sects, 1,000 years of history. However, Ji Tianxing was unmoved. The 5 fingers on his right hand were still emitting a 5-colored radiance as he controlled the entire mountain protection formation. Origin returning mountain was still shaking violently, and it was still collapsing and being destroyed. The entire origin returning mountain was in chaos. Countless disciples were so frightened that they fled in panic. They screamed and screamed, and the screams continued to spread into the hall. Zhao Guiyuan was so anxious that his eyes turned red, but there was nothing he could do. He knew very well that if he wanted to save Origin Returning Sect, he could only beg for Kenshin's forgiveness. Therefore, he maintained his kneeling posture and quickly moved his knees, crawling towards Ji Tianxing. In just 10 breaths, he crawled 300 steps with his knees and arrived in front of Ji Tianxing. He cried and kowtowed as he begged for forgiveness. "Master Kenshin, please have mercy. It was me who was blind and did not know the difference between life and death. I actually angered you. Please punish me alone and let the Guiyuan sect off. I will bear all the responsibility for any wrongdoings. Please let those innocent disciples go." Ji Tianxing looked down at him and said expressionlessly, "What's the point of having a treacherous sect?" Although his tone was calm, it contained a terrifying pressure that made Zhao Guiyuan tremble. He lay on the ground in fear and repented with all his might. "I am a bastard. I was blinded by greed. I forgot my ancestors. I betrayed them. No matter how Senior punishes me, I will not complain. However, Senior, please have mercy on those innocent disciples and let them live. As long as you let Origin Returning Sect go, I am willing to fight for Senior with my life. I will use all of Origin Returning Sect's strength to fight alongside Tianzhu Mountain." Zhao Guiyuan was a smart person. He knew the purpose of the Huanglong Daoist and Kenshin's visit. He knew Kenshin's character very well. Therefore, he did not dare to play any tricks and directly expressed his attitude. Ji Tianxing stared at him coldly and asked, "You have already betrayed Tianzhu Mountain. How can I trust you?" Zhao Guiyuan quickly raised his hand to the sky and said solemnly, "I, Zhao Guiyuan, hereby swear that I will abide by the oath. I swear to be loyal to Master Kenshin and fight alongside Tianzhu Mountain. I would rather die than regret. I ask the heavens and earth to bear witness to this oath. If I go against it, I will be punished by the heavens. My body and soul will be destroyed. Origin Returning Sect will also be destroyed." After he finished swearing, Ji Tianxing slowly retracted his right palm and retracted the 5-colored brilliance. Immediately, the mountain protecting formation stopped operating and returned to normal. The Origin Returning Mountain stopped shaking, and the sounds of the mountains collapsing and the earth cracking stopped abruptly. Ji Tianxing stood up and walked in front of Zhao Guiyuan. He flicked out 2 silver water pillars with his right index finger and entered Zhao Guiyuan and Qin Shan's forehead respectively. The silver water pillar entered their minds and hid in their divine souls, faintly exuding a power that could destroy heaven and earth. Ji Tianxing did not stay any longer. He brought the Huanglong Daoist and Ji Bai out of the main hall. "I will give you a drop of starfire seed so that you can be completely at ease. After half a month, if I do not personally take out the starfire seed, the starfire will explode and your souls will be destroyed." Chapter 1884. When he finished speaking, Ji Tianxing had already led everyone out of the hall. He summoned the black dragon and brought everyone up into the sky, quickly disappearing into the sea of clouds. In the Guiyuan Hall, Zhao Guiyuan and Qin Shan were still kneeling on the ground, their faces ashen with despair. The stellar fire seed left behind by Ji Tianxing had made them feel completely hopeless. Originally, the two of them had planned to temporarily deal with it today. After sending Kenshin away, they would then think of a way to deal with it. But now, all their plans and fantasies had been shattered. Other than following Kenshin's orders, they had no other choice. Qin Shan cursed in a low voice, full of anger. He raised his fists and slammed them on the ground, smashing the stone floor into pieces. Ah! Damn bastard! How dare he use such despicable means to threaten us? But no matter how angry he was, it was useless. The stellar fire seed hidden in his soul made him obey obediently. Zhao Guiyuan seemed to have aged 10 years. He looked at the entrance of the hall with a blank expression and muttered to himself, How could he use such means to control us? The Kenshin of the past was the best in the world, arrogant. He didn't even bother to use such means. He has changed, the current him has become even more terrifying. After a long while, the two of them finally calmed down. Qin Shan looked at Zhao Guiyuan and asked in a low voice, Master, what should we do now? Can you take out those 2 stellar fire seeds? Zhao Guiyuan shook his head slowly and said with a bleak expression, Stop dreaming. How can you and I resist Kenshin's means? The only thing we can do now is to follow his orders. Only then can we protect our lives and the 1,000 years of foundation of the Guiyuan sect. Qin Shan hurriedly shook his head and said, Aren't we digging our own graves? Not to mention the various forces that are secretly targeting Tianzhu Mountain, just the 7 sects and 14 factions are enough to destroy Tianzhu Mountain. When Tianzhu Mountain is destroyed, we can only be buried with it. Zhao Guiyuan thought for a while and shook his head. Not necessarily. Don't jump to conclusions. Although we still don't understand why Kenshin, who has been dead for thousands of years, suddenly appeared. But he is Kenshin. He is the most mysterious and powerful expert in the world. He could create all kinds of miracles. With him around, perhaps the Pillar of Heaven's mountains will be able to resolve the crisis and prosper again? Qin Shan looked at him in shock and said in disbelief, Master, do you think this is possible? What a fool's dream! Zhao Guiyuan said with certainty, No, you're too young. You don't understand what the word Kenshin means. Qin Shan frowned and continued to ask, Kenshin has come back from the dead, and he only has the strength of a tribulation transcendence realm cultivator. If this news is spread, it will cause a shocking flood. Master, why don't we spread this news? Maybe it'll attract all kinds of experts to besiege Kenshin and kill him. Before he could finish speaking, Zhao Guiyuan glared at him and shouted angrily, Do you have a pig's brain? Do you want to die? If we spread the news, he would kill us first and destroy the entire Guiyuan sect before the other experts come to kill him. Moreover, how do you know if the experts will kill him or pledge their allegiance and help him after the news is spread? Even the 3 martial gods owe him a favor. All kinds of heroes will respond to his call. Do you understand? Qin Shan fell silent. He did not dare to have any more fantasies. At noon, the golden sun hung high in the sky. The black dragon was speeding through the sea of clouds, rushing to the west as fast as a shooting star. Ji Tianxing and the rest stood on the dragon's back. They stood proudly in the wind, their clothes fluttering in the wind. Huanglong Daoist looked at Ji Tianxing in front of him. His face was filled with a gratified smile, and his eyes were filled with excitement. Master, your methods are too brilliant. It's simple, violent, and effective. For the past few decades, I've thought of all kinds of methods, but I couldn't make Zhao Guiyuan listen to me. But you only used an hour to subdue the Guiyuan sect and make Zhao Guiyuan listen to you. Now that the Guiyuan sect listens to us, the other 2 sects under the Guiyuan sect have no choice but to submit to us. Ji Tianxing looked at the sky in front of him and pondered. When he heard Huanglong Daoist's words, his lips curled into a smile. He said playfully, Desperate times call for desperate measures. Most importantly, Zhao Guiyuan has not broken through to the martial sage realm. He has no right to resist. When Huanglong Daoist heard this, he quickly nodded in agreement. That's right. This is indeed the main reason. A few hundred years ago, I was still able to intimidate the 9 sects and 18 factions. They did not dare to rebel openly and would only obey in public. However, ever since the two fellows from the Battle Dragon sect and the Boundless sect reached the martial sage realm, they did not take our sect seriously. In recent years, they felt that their forces and resources were strong enough, so they dared to rebel openly. In the end, it's because there are martial sages. A cold glint flashed across Ji Tianqing's eyes. He laughed coldly. Don't worry. They won't be able to jump around for long. At most, they will have to submit in 10 days. Although Huanglong Daoist felt that this was a little unrealistic, he was still full of confidence and anticipation. As long as it was Ji Tianqing who said it, he would trust him without reservation. Even if Ji Tianqing said that he could pluck the sun from the sky, Huanglong Daoist would not doubt him. In the evening, the sun was setting in the west. The black dragon flew to the top of a mountain that was more than 2,000 feet tall and gradually came to a stop. In the surrounding 20,000 miles, this mountain was the tallest and most majestic. Its aura was also the strongest. After all, this was one of the 108 mountains. It was an excellent place with spiritual veins. Ji Tianqing stood on the back of the black dragon and looked down at the palace at the top of the mountain. Huanglong Daoist took the initiative to introduce, "Master, this is the Wuji sect. Their attitude is the same as that of the Guiyuan sect. They will watch from the sidelines and will not help. The current sect leader is still Qi Hao. This old man is greedy for power and is unwilling to give up his position. He has been the sect leader for more than 1,000 years. Qi Hao has also passed the 8th tribulation and is trying his best to break through to the martial sage realm. His 4 disciples have also reached the 5th level of the tribulation realm and above." Ji Tianqing nodded and rode the black dragon to the top of the mountain. When the black dragon landed on the top of the mountain and was a few hundred feet away from the top, it activated the protective mountain array. A defensive light shield with a radius of 100 miles immediately appeared in the sky and covered the top of the mountain. This huge light shield was black and white. It contained the secret of yin and yang and was very powerful. The black dragon was pushed back a few hundred feet. However, it was not injured. Ji Tianqing activated the God's Eye secret technique, and his eyes immediately turned golden. He stared at the black and white light shield and observed the structure of the array. After a short 10 breaths, he saw the structure of the protective mountain array clearly. The corners of his mouth curled up into a playful sneer. "Ha ha! The Wuji sect has improved. They know to make corresponding improvements and strengthen the heaven and earth infinite array." Chapter 1885. Upon hearing Ji Tianqing's words, the Huanglong Daoist shook his head. "Master, there's no need to go through so much trouble to break the formation. Let me negotiate with them. The black dragon crashed into the protective formation just now, so it will definitely attract the patrolling guards." Ji Tianqing thought for a moment before nodding in agreement. At the same time, he had the black dragon transform into a pitch-black dragon-shaped sword that floated behind him. Just as the Huanglong Daoist expected, a group of patrolling guards rushed over in a short period of time. The leader of the guards was a middle-aged man with a resolute face. He brought 9 guards and flew to the front, growling with a deep voice, "Who are you? How dare you trespass into the Boundless sect?" The Huanglong Daoist revealed an arrogant expression and said in a dignified tone, "Go and report to your sect master that the Huanglong Daoist from the Pillar of Heaven's mountains has come to visit and has something important to ask." The faces of the guards changed, and they all bowed solemnly. "We didn't know that great immortal Huanglong had come. Please forgive us for our offense. Greetings to great immortal Huanglong." Great immortal Huanglong was famous in the Pillar of Heaven's mountains. Regardless of whether it was the disciples of the sect or the citizens of the city, they all had to respectfully bow and call him Great Immortal. After the guard captain bowed, he said respectfully, "Please wait here for a moment, Great Immortal. This junior will go and report to the sect master." After saying that, the guard captain turned around and flew towards the peak of the mountain to report the news. Ji Tianxing and the others stood in the sky, separated from the 9 guards by a layer of light, patiently waiting. Within the boundless sect, in the most majestic and dignified boundless palace, in a simple and elegant study, a white-haired old man wearing a green robe was sitting in front of a large table, engrossed in reading an ancient scroll. The old man was thin and had a white beard and white hair. 2 strands of snow-white hair hung down from his temples, giving him the aura of an otherworldly expert. At this moment, a middle-aged man's voice came from outside the study. Reporting to Sect Master, the Huanglong Taoist of Tianzhu Mountain has come to visit. He is waiting outside the mountain protection formation. He said that he has something important to ask. The green-robed, white-haired elder was Qi Hao, the sect master of the Wuji sect. Hearing the guard's report, he quickly put down the ancient book in his hand and furrowed his brows. Old Taoist Huang Long actually came to visit our sect personally? This old fellow must be seeking help from me in order to save the Pillar of Heaven's mountains. Qi Hao muttered to himself as the corners of his mouth curled up into a sneer. Humph! The Pillar of Heaven's mountains had already declined to such an extent that it was not far from destruction. Soon it would be destroyed by the other 7 sects and 14 factions. The reason why our sect didn't rebel because we didn't want to bear the bad reputation of being a traitor. This old man is already benevolent enough not to loot a burning house. How can I possibly help the Pillar of Heaven's mountains? Isn't that courting death and being buried with the Pillar of Heaven's mountains? At this point, Qi Hao made up his mind and ordered in a dignified tone, "Go and tell the Huanglong Taoist that I have already gone into seclusion and will only come out after at least 10 years. No matter what, ask him to wait for me to come out of seclusion." The guard captain outside the door immediately bowed and received the order. He said respectfully, "I understand." Ji Tianxing and the Huanglong Taoist waited patiently for the time it took to burn a stick of incense before they saw the guard captain return. The guard captain came closer and bowed to the Huanglong Taoist. He replied expressionlessly, "Reporting to Great Immortal Huanglong, our sect master has already gone into seclusion to cultivate. Our sect master wants to comprehend the divine technique and will only come out after at least 10 years. If Great Immortal has any matters, please wait for our sect master to come out of seclusion before you visit." The Huanglong Taoist originally thought that Qi Hao would meet him no matter what and would not even give him face. However, he did not expect that the other party would reply in such a way. His face immediately darkened and he scolded angrily, "Bastard! Half a year ago, this old man still had communication with Qi Hao. How could he have gone into seclusion?" The guard captain revealed a look of fear and trepidation. However, he explained in a neither servile nor overbearing manner, "Please calm down, Great Immortal. This matter is absolutely true. This junior is only responsible for transmitting the message and is unable to help. If there is nothing else, this junior will take his leave. Great Immortal, please go back." After saying that, the guard captain turned around and flew away with the 9 guards. The Huanglong Taoist was left in the same place. He was so angry that he frowned and a cold light surged in his eyes. Damn that Qi Hao! This old man is really capable. In the past, he only dared to obey in public but disobey in private. Now that I have personally come to see him, he dares to shut his door and refuse to see me. The Huanglong Taoist's status and authority had been greatly challenged and despised. Of course, he was full of anger. However, Ji Tianxing had already expected this result. He said calmly, "The world is fickle. Qi Hao's reaction is normal. You don't have to take it to heart. Since he doesn't know what's good for him, I will teach him an unforgettable lesson." After saying that, he activated the Mystic Eye technique and stared at the mountain guarding array in front of him. He formed a spell with both hands and shot out streaks of dazzling light. He poured a vast amount of 5-colored Dharma power into the infinite heaven and earth array. This infinite heaven and earth array was not set up by him. However, this kind of saint-level array was not difficult for him. He only needed to spend some time to break it. As he used the mystic array technique and poured 18 streaks of 5-colored Dharma power into the black and white light shield, the array's veins immediately changed. After a short 30 breaths of time, the formation was broken, and a hole with a radius of 30 feet appeared. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Ji Tianxing brought Huang Long and Ji Bai Shohei into the formation through the gap. Then, they quietly landed on the peak of the mountain and hid in a forest. Ji Tianxing continued to cast spells with his palms and shot out thousands of streaks of 5-colored light into the infinite heaven and earth array. Huang Long Daoist immediately guessed his intention. He asked, "Master, are you planning to control this mountain-guarding array and destroy the infinite mountain to teach Qi Hao a lesson?" "That's right." Ji Tianxing nodded. Huang Long Daoist said angrily, "Then I will help you. This time, we must destroy most of the Wuji sect. Only then can we intimidate Qi Hao." Ji Tianxing shook his head and refused his help. "You don't need to help me. Take the Black Dragon sword and Ji Bai and prepare to block the Wuji sect." Huang Long Daoist was startled for a moment. He quickly turned his head to look at the middle of the mountain peak and saw a few streaks of light rushing over. Obviously, Ji Tianxing's invasion and modification of the infinite heaven and earth array had alarmed the experts of the Wuji sect. Huang Long Daoist glanced over and saw 5 tribulation stage experts among the 5 streaks of light. Therefore, he grinned coldly, held the Black Dragon sword, and led Ji Bai and Shohei to meet them. "Let's go. Let's give them some appetizers first." After 2 breaths, Huang Long Daoist rushed to the middle of the mountain peak and landed in the square. Ji Bai and Shohei also quickly followed and stood behind him, holding the sword in their arms. Chapter 1886. The Huang Long Daoist and Ji Bai stood in the middle of the square. The 5 streaks of light flew closer and landed 100 steps away from them. Swish, swish, swish. A burst of multicolored light flashed, and 5 experts of different heights and sizes lined up in a row on the square. Among the 5 people, 2 of them were old men in black robes. Both of them had white hair and carried black heavy swords on their back. The Huang Long Daoist recognized them. They were the left and right protectors of the Wuji sect. The other 3 experts in purple robes were the 3 protectors of the Wuji sect. The 5 of them looked coldly at the Huang Long Daoist with displeasure, secretly accumulating power. The left protector questioned first, "Great Immortal Huang Long, our sect master is in seclusion and can't see any guests. You actually broke through the formation and barged in. You're looking down on our sect." The right protector also echoed, "Great Immortal Huang Long, you're a respected senior. How can you do such a thing? Aren't you afraid of damaging your reputation and that of the Pillar of Heaven's mountains? If you leave now, our sect can pretend that nothing happened." Before he could finish, the Huang Long Daoist sneered angrily, "Humph! You juniors still know that I'm a senior? Why don't you salute me when you see me? Furthermore, the Wuji sect is a subordinate of the Pillar of Heaven's mountains. I'm here to inspect the sect, but Qi Hao closed the door and refused to see me. Do you have any respect for me?" As soon as he finished speaking, he released a formless aura that spread in all directions and enveloped the entire square. Immediately, cracks appeared on the ground of the square, which had a radius of thousands of feet, along with a series of cracking sounds. The left and right protectors and the 3 elders were also suppressed by the formless aura. Their faces turned pale, and their bodies trembled. Even so, everyone clenched their teeth and endured. The left protector defended himself with a firm tone, "Our sect master is indeed in seclusion. How can he refuse to see you? Great Immortal Huang Long, you're using your status and strength as a martial saint to distort the truth and slander our sect master." "He slander?" Huang Long Daoist immediately sneered and shouted in a low voice like muffled thunder, "Then this old man will show you whether Qi Hao is in seclusion or not." Hearing this, the expressions of the 5 powerhouses changed, and they all roared angrily. Huanglong Taoist, what are you trying to do? Even if you're a senior, you can't be so unreasonable. Stop! However, the Huanglong Taoist sneered at the crowd and stomped his right foot on the ground. Boom! An earth-shattering explosion erupted, shaking the heavens. At that moment, the entire everlasting mountain began to tremble violently. The ground at the peak of the mountain also began to tremble violently. With the Huanglong Taoist as the center, the ground of the entire square had completely collapsed. The cracks were like a spider web. However, this was only on the surface. The destructive power rushed into the mountain. Many of the secret chambers and underground palaces that the Wuji sect had built beneath the ground were instantly destroyed. Large cracks also appeared on the mountain walls of the everlasting mountain, and countless rocks and stones collapsed. The dozen or so palaces and residences at the peak of the mountain shook violently dozens of times. Large cracks appeared on the walls, and pillars were broken. After a full 10 breaths of time, this earthquake finally ended. The boundless sect was thrown into disarray, as if a dog was flying and a dog was jumping around. Countless disciples fled in panic and gathered together to discuss what had happened. The Huanglong Taoist stroked his beard with a smile and said with his head held high, "This old man only used 30% of his strength. This old man will stomp again every 100 breaths of time. If Qi Hao still doesn't come out, then your Wuji sect will have to find another sect." The expressions of the left and right protectors and the 3 elders instantly became extremely ugly. They were both angry and humiliated. Huanglong Taoist, you've gone too far. You want to destroy the everlasting mountain and destroy our sect's 1,000-year-old foundation? Damn it! For 1,000 years, the outside world has been saying that the Huanglong Taoist is a person of virtue, prestige, and kindness. I didn't expect you to be so despicable and bully the weak. Huanglong Taoist, even if you're a martial sage, you shouldn't humiliate our sect like this. You're forcing our sect to go to war with the Pillar of Heaven's mountains. Everyone cursed with righteous indignation, denouncing the Huanglong Taoist's crimes. The Huanglong Taoist was indeed an honest and kind elder. He was also a senior of virtue and prestige. What he did just now was definitely not his nature. It was only because Kenshin had returned that he had the confidence to rely on Ji Tianqing's methods. Faced with the reprimands of the experts, he retorted with a straight face, "What a joke! Back then, it was the Pillar of Heaven's mountains that gave you a place with a spirit vein for you to rest and recuperate. The Wuji sect was besieged by several other sects and was almost exterminated. It was the Pillar of Heaven's mountains that kept you safe until today. Today, even if I destroy the Wuji sect, I'm only taking back the territory of the Pillar of Heaven's mountains. What right do you have to be angry?" The left and right protectors and the 3 elders were all red with anger and could not refute. After all, what the Huanglong Taoist said was the truth. If the Pillar of Heaven's mountains had not united the surrounding 100 million miles and arranged mountain bases for the 9 sects and 18 factions, the Wuji sect would have been exterminated long ago. If it was not for Kenshin's words, Sect Master Qi Hao would have been killed by the experts of the other sections. Even if more than 1,000 years had passed, this history could not be erased. The left and right protectors and the 3 elders could not stand on the side of reason and could only change the topic. Next, a few elders and more than 10 deacons arrived at the square one after another. Almost all the higher-ups and experts of the Wuji sect were present. Everyone was together to suppress the Huanglong Taoist. Qi Hao was the only one who did not show up. The Huanglong Taoist talked with everyone while releasing his divine sense to search for Qi Hao's traces in the mountain. Soon 100 breaths passed. The Huanglong Taoist stomped his foot again and released 40% of his power into the Wuji sect. Boom! With a loud noise, the entire square collapsed and turned into a huge pit. This huge pit extended in all directions and covered most of the mountain peak. More than 10 palaces and houses were all tilted and on the verge of collapse. Thousands of disciples fled into the sky in panic or gathered in the open space, watching this scene with fear. The elders of the Wuji sect were infuriated when they saw how badly their sect had been destroyed. They couldn't hold back their anger anymore. Huanglong Taoist, you've gone too far. We'll fight you to the death. We'd rather die here than surrender. Huanglong Taoist, you forced us to do this. The left and right protectors, 6 elders, and 14 deacons all took out their weapons and surrounded the Huanglong Taoist. They were about to attack immediately. At this moment, a cold, angry roar came from the broken palace. All of you, stop! As this voice sounded, a white-haired elder in a green robe flew over like a flash of light and landed in the square. The Huanglong Taoist sneered when he saw the green-robed elder. Chapter 1887. The green-robed old man was the sect leader of the Infinity sect, Qi Hao. He did not want to show himself, and did not want to discuss the Pillar of Heaven's mountain with the Huanglong Taoist. However, he did not expect the Huanglong Taoist to change his attitude and use such a shameless method to force him to show himself. Seeing that the Wuji mountain had been destroyed, the elders and deacons of the Infinity sect were about to attack the Huanglong Taoist. Qi Hao was forced into a corner, and he had no choice but to show himself. After all, the Infinity sect could not afford to offend the Huanglong Taoist. A martial sage could destroy the Infinite Mountain and kill 80% of the Infinity sect's disciples. Then, he could escape. If a fight broke out, the Infinity sect would suffer heavy losses. After Qi Hao arrived, the elders and deacons crowded around him and complained to him about the Huanglong Taoist's crimes. Sect leader, the Huanglong Taoist has gone too far. Sect leader, the Wuji mountain has been destroyed by him. We cannot let him off. The Pillar of Heaven's mountain is digging their own grave by being so aggressive. If the Pillar of Heaven's mountain is heartless, then don't blame us for being heartless. We want to leave the Pillar of Heaven's mountain too. Hearing the angry shouts of the crowd, Qi Hao waved his hand and signaled for the crowd to quiet down. The Huanglong Taoist looked at him sternly and ordered, Qi Hao, get everyone to leave. I want to settle the score with you. Qi Hao frowned and ordered, other than the left and right protectors, everyone else is to leave. The elders and deacons were unwilling to leave. However, they had to obey the sect leader's orders. Soon, the elders and deacons left. Only Qi Hao and the left and right protectors were left in the huge square. Qi Hao stared fiercely at Huanglong Taoist and asked in a deep voice, Great Immortal Huanglong, you don't have to tell me why you're here today. If you come with sincerity and have a friendly discussion with our sect, perhaps our sect will consider our old friendship and provide assistance to the Pillar of Heaven's mountains to the best of our ability. But you're being rude and aggressive. You're simply trampling on the dignity of our sect. I can tell you bluntly that now that things have developed to this stage, our sect will never reconcile with the Pillar of Heaven's mountains. Even if you go on a killing spree here today, our sect will not comply. We will fight to the end. Even though the Boundless sect is weak, they will not tolerate humiliation. Before Huanglong Taoist could speak, a cold and dignified voice came from the ruins at the edge of the square. How dare such a treacherous and shameless sect talk about the dignity of a sect? Do you have the right to talk about integrity? The sudden voice stunned Qi Hao and the left and right protectors. The three of them were full of anger and looked coldly at the edge of the square. They saw a young man in a white robe stepping out of the ruins. He walked over 1,000 feet with each step. This person was handsome and heroic. His face was cold, and his eyes were as deep as the stars. They contained a frightening divine power. The left and right protectors frowned, and their eyes were full of vigilance. Qi Hao stared at the young man in the white robe. His eyes were as wide as copper bells, and his eyes were full of horror. His expression gradually changed, revealing a look of disbelief and shock. His entire body stiffened. After a few breaths, the young man in the white robe came to the center of the square and stood still beside Huanglong Daoist. Chi Hao came back to his senses. His expression was as if he had seen a ghost. His body trembled as he exclaimed, You! How could you? He was in a mess. His mind was blank, and he almost lost the ability to think. His words were incoherent. The left and right protectors did not know the young man in the white robe. When they saw Chi Hao's frightened reaction, they felt a little strange and were secretly puzzled. The young man in the white robe was Ji Tianxing. He looked at Chi Hao indifferently and shouted in a deep voice, Evil creature, kneel down and admit your mistake when you see me. Such a familiar figure, face, and temperament. Even his eyes and voice were like that person's. Chi Hao no longer had any doubts. He exclaimed in horror, Sure enough. It's really you. How can you still be alive? Ji Tianxing frowned. A cold light flashed in his eyes, and his whole body emitted a sacred and majestic aura. It rushed toward Chi Hao like a raging wave. Suddenly, Chi Hao's body swayed like a willow in the wind. His face was pale, and he was sweating profusely. He was extremely terrified. At that moment, countless memories appeared in his mind. They were all scenes from back then. That person's peerless divine might swept through his memories like a tide, filling his mind. The reverence and fear that came from the depths of his soul made him unable to keep calm. His knees gave way, and he knelt on the ground. Thud! Chi Hao put his hands on the ground, lowered his head, and kowtowed respectfully. Chi Hao, greetings, Lord Kenshin. The left and right protectors looked at this scene with their mouths agape. They were petrified and dumbfounded. Neither of them expected that the sect master, who was full of arrogance and majesty just a moment ago, would kneel on the ground so sincerely. They also did not expect that the sect master would address the young man in the white robe as Lord Kenshin. Although they had never seen Kenshin's appearance, they had heard about Kenshin's deeds since they were young. For countless years, they had regarded Kenshin as their idol and role model, and they had worked hard to cultivate. They had also felt extremely regretful for the fall of the Sword God. But now they were seeing Kenshin with their own eyes. The left and right protectors were stunned for a moment, but they were unable to maintain their calm. They knelt down and bowed respectfully. This junior greets Lord Kenshin. Ji Tianxing ignored the left and right protectors and stared down at Chi Hao. His gaze was cold as he said in a low voice, Chi Hao, today, you have completely fallen. Thousands of years have passed, and it seems that you have already forgotten that period of time. The Boundless sect obtained a rare treasure and was attacked by the three great sections. More than half of their disciples were slaughtered, and their sect was destroyed. Let me ask you, who was it that ordered the three great sects to retreat when the Boundless sect was on the brink of destruction? Chi Hao crouched on the ground, his entire body trembling slightly, and his forehead was covered in dense beads of sweat. His expression was extremely ugly, and the expression in his eyes was complex. After a moment of silence, he replied in a hoarse voice, It was you, Senior. You were the one who protected the Boundless sect. Ji Tianxing asked in a cold voice, Let me ask you again. After the three great sects retreated, they sent out a dozen or so experts to secretly kill you and your two enforcers and steal the rare treasure. The two enforcers died in battle to protect you, and you were severely injured. Your legs were cut off, and your life was hanging by a thread. Who was the one who appeared in time, forced the three great sects experts to retreat, and personally saved your life? And who was the one who gave the Boundless sect a treasure trove of spirit veins to recuperate? Chi Hao's body stiffened, and his expression became even uglier. Cold sweat poured down his body like rain. Chapter 1888. Ji Tianxing asked 3 questions in a row, causing Chi Hao's expression to become extremely terrified. His cold and authoritative voice was like a sharp knife stabbing into Chi Hao's heart. Not only was he terrified, but he was also sweating profusely as he lay on the ground in shame. Even the left and right protectors behind him had ugly expressions, and their eyes were filled with shame. Ji Tianqing nodded slightly and said coldly, "Very good. No matter how much of a bastard you are, at least you haven't lost your humanity and still remember what happened in the past. Then let me ask you one last time. I was the one who gave you your life, I was the one who gave you this Wuji mountain, and I was the one who saved the entire Wuji sect. How is it that you can be so ungrateful and shameless even now? Where is your conscience? Where is your humanity?" Every single shout was like divine lightning from the 9 heavens, and it fiercely blasted onto Qi Hao's body and struck his soul. His body trembled again, and his expression and eyes were filled with extreme shame. He had nothing to say, and he didn't have the courage to answer these questions. He could only press his lips together and remain silent. Ji Tianqing sighed and slowly raised his hands. He said expressionlessly, "Perhaps you weren't wrong, and the Wuji sect wasn't wrong either. I was the one who was wrong. I shouldn't have saved this lowly sect back then, and I definitely shouldn't have saved an ungrateful life. Since that's the case, I will end this mistake today. The Wuji sect and you don't need to exist anymore." As soon as he finished speaking, he formed a hand seal with his hands, and thousands of streaks of 5-colored spiritual light flew into the sky and the ground. Instantly, the entire protective formation sped up, and the black and white defensive light barrier also released a 5-colored light that shot into the sky. A vast aura of heaven and earth erupted, and a terrifying amount of heaven and earth divine power surged into the Wuji mountain. The Wuji mountain began to tremble violently, and a series of earth-shattering rumbles sounded. Huge ravines began to appear on the cliffs of the mountain. The ground at the peak of the mountain was shattering, and many palaces and residences began to collapse, sending debris and dust into the air. The Boundless Mountain's mountain-protecting Grand Array actually released the power of annihilation, wanting to destroy this giant peak. Qi Hao and the left and right protectors were dazed for a moment before they came back to themselves and roared in grief and indignation. "Ah, no. Lord Kenshin, please show mercy and let us go. Lord Kenshin, this junior knows his wrongs. The Boundless sect knows its wrongs." Ji Tianqing was not moved at all. His hands were still casting spells to control the protective mountain array. The everlasting mountain shook even more violently, accelerating its collapse. Thousands of disciples were fleeing in panic, screaming in fear and despair. However, no one could resist the power of the protective mountain formation, much less the divine power of heaven and earth. Everyone fell into despair, but they were unable to escape from the everlasting mountain. They could only be trapped in the array and welcome the arrival of death. Qi Hao was also in despair. His heart was filled with anxiety, worry, regret, and shame. He was on the verge of a mental breakdown. Too many things had happened in this short period of time. The shock and impact on him was simply too great. Now, he could no longer bear the burden. He kowtowed desperately and begged for mercy. Tears streamed down his face as he cried, "Senior Kenshin, Qi Hao knows his wrongs. I beg you, please let me live. I, Qi Hao, swear to the heavens that I will be loyal to the Pillar of Heaven's mountains until the end of my life. I will not dare to have any other thoughts. I will live and die with the Pillar of Heaven's mountains. Please believe me one more time. Spare my life and spare the Boundless sect." As he begged for mercy, he knocked his head repeatedly on the ground, shattering the stone floor. Blood also appeared on his forehead. As long as he could live, as long as he could protect the Boundless sect, he could not care less about anything else. His personal honor and the dignity of the sect were all thrown out the window. As for resisting? In front of Kenshin and the Huanglong Taoist, that was absolutely impossible. Qi Hao and the left and right protectors didn't even dare to think about it. They didn't even dare to think about it. Kenshin's might was so great that even the 3 martial gods paled in comparison. Who would dare to oppose him? At that moment, Ji Tianqing slowly retracted his hands and stopped channeling his technique. The protective formation immediately stopped operating, and the boundless mountain also calmed down. Everything came to an abrupt end. Only the screams and cries of the countless disciples continued for a long time before coming to a stop. When he saw that Ji Tianqing had finally stopped, Qi Hao, who had been kowtowing and begging for mercy this entire time, finally let out a sigh of relief. His eyes revealed the expression of someone who had just survived a calamity, as if he had just walked through the gates of hell. His entire body was drenched in cold sweat. "Thank you, Senior Kenshin, for your mercy. Thank you, Senior, for not killing me." He regained his composure and continued to kowtow in gratitude, not daring to complain in the slightest. The left and right protectors also kowtowed, and the fear and despair in their hearts gradually dissipated. Ji Tianqing looked at Qi Hao indifferently and said, "I gave you your life, and I can take it back at any time. I saved the Boundless sect, and I can destroy it at any time. Seeing that you have repented for your mistakes, I will let you live for another half a month." Upon hearing this, Qi Hao and the left and right protectors were both stunned. They did not quite understand what he meant. At the same time, Ji Tianqing raised his palms and shot out 3 silver balls of light. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. 3 silver balls of light the size of date pits quickly burrowed into the glabella of the 3 people and entered their divine souls. Instantly, the 3 of them felt their bodies turn cold, and a terrifying fire seed appeared in their divine souls. "These 3 fire seeds will hide in your divine souls for half a month. No one can take them out except for me. After half a month, the fire seeds will explode, and you will all be turned to ashes. If you don't want to die, then obediently wait for my orders." Ji Tianqing's expression was indifferent. Then, he turned around and left with the Huanglong Taoist. Qi Hao and the left and right protectors were stunned. Their eyes were filled with fear and despair, and their hearts sank to the bottom. The 3 starfire seeds had cut off their last hope and escape route. At this point, they had no other choice. The 3 of them came to their senses and hurriedly kowtowed to Ji Tianqing's back. They called out respectfully, "Farewell, Lord Kenshin." A moment later, after Ji Tianqing, Huanglong, and the others disappeared into the horizon, Qi Hao and the other 2 people raised their heads. The pressure that had enveloped them gradually dissipated, and the fear that lingered in their hearts also slowly receded. The 3 of them gradually calmed down and looked up at their surroundings. Seeing that the Wuji mountain was covered in cracks and was in a mess, Qi Hao and the left and right protectors wanted to cry, but no tears came out. When they recalled what had happened in the last 15 minutes, the 3 of them still felt like a dream. Everything was unreal. Even now, Qi Hao and the left and right protectors could not believe that Kenshin, who had been dead for thousands of years, had appeared again. Such a shocking thing was simply an unprecedented miracle. A moment later, the left protector could not help but ask, "Sect Master, what should we do next?" Chapter 1889. In the middle of the night, the Black Dragon carried Ji Tianqing and the others back to Tianzhu Mountain. After returning to Tianzhu Palace, Ji Tianqing brought Huanglong Taoist into the secret room. Ji Tianqing sat on the throne. Huanglong Taoist stood in the secret room with a gratified smile and said, "Master, now that Wuji sect and Guiyuan sect have been subdued by you, the other 4 sects will also listen to your orders. At that time, even if the 7 sects and 14 schools attack us, we will have more help. What other orders and plans do you have?" Ji Tianqing said calmly, "The 2 sects and 4 schools are weak, so the help they can provide is limited. If we want to resist the siege of the 7 sects and 14 schools, it is not enough. The key is that Tianzhu Mountain needs to improve its strength." He took out a jade slip from his interspatial ring and tossed it to Huang Long with a wave of his hand. He instructed, "The Stellar Sword Codex that I left behind all those years ago, the secret techniques and supreme techniques in it are only the initial embryonic form. In the following hundreds of years, I have perfected those secret techniques to the extreme. In this jade slip, the perfect Imperial Sword Sutra is recorded. Take it and study it well and improve your strength as much as possible. Huanglong Daoist's eyes lit up and he said excitedly, "The perfect Imperial Sword Sutra? Master, after you ascended to the upper realm, you became the divine king that ruled over thousands of gods, so you have perfected the Imperial Sword Sutra into a cultivation technique for gods?" Ji Tianxing nodded slightly and explained, "The mysteries of sword arts are the same as the mysteries of martial arts. They are endless. However, you are still unable to cultivate the god-level Imperial Sword Sutra. The Imperial Sword Sutra that I gave you is only suitable for martial saints and martial gods. With your current strength, if you cultivate the first-generation Imperial Sword Sutra, you can only hide your sword in the void and control 9 sword. If you can cultivate the perfect Imperial Sword Sutra, not only will you be able to hide your sword in the void, but you will also be able to control 36 swords." Huanglong Daoist's blood surged and he became more and more excited. "That's great. The Imperial Sword Sutra that Master created is definitely the #1 secret technique of sword arts in the world. Master, please put it down. Disciple will definitely do his best to comprehend it and definitely won't disappoint Master." Ji Tianxing nodded and said, "Go and cultivate. I still have many things to do." Huanglong Daoist cupped his hands and bowed. "Disciple obeys. Don't worry, Master. Disciple has already arranged spies and scouts to monitor the movements of the 7 sects and 14 factions. If they attack, we will receive the news immediately. In addition, the elders of our sect will also try to reinforce the formation. The disciples will also try to heal their injuries and recover their strength as soon as possible." Ji Tianxing nodded to show that he understood and waved his hand to signal him to leave. After the Huanglong Daoist left, he was the only one left in the secret chamber. Only then did he reveal a grave expression and frown. "I was able to subdue the Guiyuan sect and the Wuji sect today because Zhao Guiyuan and Qi Hao had not broken through to the martial sage realm. They had no right to resist. Moreover, these 2 sects are indebted to me. They fear my might back then, which is why they submitted so easily. However, the 7 sects and 14 factions have 2 martial sages, and they have the right to resist. Even if I appear to suppress them, my strength is only at the peak of the crossing calamity stage. My deterrence is greatly reduced." Ji Tianxing muttered to himself. He frowned and pondered for a moment. Then, he had an idea. "I have to find a way to perform the Armillary Heaven's secret skill and merge my aura with the heavens and earth. Only then can I hide my strength and not let the martial sages see through me." The Armillary Heaven's secret skill was an ancient secret skill from the Antiquity Age. It had been lost for thousands of years. Back then, he had accidentally obtained 2 pages of a cultivation technique in a secret realm. Only then did he learn the Armillary Heaven secret skill. Later, he found the complete incantation of the Armillary Heaven secret skill in the Dragon realm. Only then did he master it. The effect of this god-level secret skill was far from just hiding one's strength and realm. It had many other uses. Even in the upper world, he would often use it. However, Ji Tianxing only had the strength of the crossing calamity stage. Even if he had the complete incantation of the secret skill in his memory and countless cultivation experiences. However, he did not have enough strength to perform the Armillary Heaven secret skill. "If I reach the martial sage realm, I can perform the god-level secret skill in advance. Now, I can only find another way and borrow the divine power of the heavens and earth." After making up his mind, Ji Tianxing walked out of the secret room and came to the dojo at the peak of the mountain. He walked to the foot of the sword steel and said to Burial of Heaven with his divine thought, "Burial of Heaven, you have to help me." The pitch-black sword steel shone with a faint fluorescent light. It was surrounded by 5 colored spirit chi. Burial of Heaven's deep voice sounded in his mind. What do you need me to do? I want to activate the Armillary Heaven formation. With the formation and your help, I can perform the Armillary Heaven secret skill. Burial of Heaven thought for a while and said in a low voice, You are weak now and your identity has been exposed. You do need the Armillary Heaven secret skill to hide your true realm. The Armillary Heaven formation should also be activated. Not only can it protect the dojo, but it can also help me recover my strength quickly. Ji Tianqing didn't say anything else and stepped into the night sky. After 9 steps, he was already high up in the sky and stood at the top of the sword steel. He sat cross-legged at the top of the sword steel and slowly raised his palms. Then, he began to cast a spell. Swish, swish. As his palms moved quickly, they flew up and down, left and right, drawing thousands of mysterious trajectories in the night sky. Dazzling 5-colored spiritual light flew out of his fingertips and landed in the surrounding dojos. At the same time, large ancient seal characters would appear in the night sky around him. It was a secret seal that could gather boundless magic power and activate the power of the heaven and earth and the Great Formation. At the same time, the 1,000-feet sword steel also released a 5-colored spiritual light that poured down like a waterfall and into the dojo. About 100 breaths later, Ji Tianqing's secret technique was finally completed. He sat on the sword steel with a solemn expression. His left hand formed a seal and pointed to the night sky, while his right hand formed a seal and pointed to the ground. At this moment, the night sky was clear and there were stars shining brightly. There was also a bright moon that shone down its moonlight for hundreds of millions of miles. Ji Tianqing's left hand activated the power of the stars, causing specks of silver light to fall from the night sky and sprinkle on the dojo like rain. His right hand poured boundless magic power into the dojo like a water column. The Burial of Heaven also released a boundless power and poured it into the dojo. The dojo within 100 miles was immediately enveloped by the brilliance of the stars and magic power. The ground was covered with a layer of 5-colored spiritual light. The densely packed patterns and patterns of the formation also lit up as if they were alive. Boundless magic power flowed among the hundreds of millions of patterns and quickly spread in all directions. The night sky was dark and silent. Time passed silently. In the entire dojo, there was only Ji Tianqing alone. No one came to disturb him. About 2 hours later, the 100-mile dojo was covered with spiritual light. The hundreds of millions of patterns all lit up with starlight. A vast power that encompassed the heaven and earth was born in the dojo. It spread in all directions and was about to cover the entire pillar of heaven's mountains. Chapter 1890. Unknowingly, an entire night had passed. When the first light of dawn arrived, the sky dome formation had been successfully activated. A faint layer of spiritual light lit up the dojo within 100 miles. An invisible force formed a huge defensive light shield that covered the entire pillar of heaven's mountains. The light shield was usually hidden and would only reveal itself when it was attacked by external forces. Of course, the defensive power of the sky dome formation gathered the power of heaven and earth and could be called a god-level formation. Ordinary martial sages would not be able to break it. With the protection of the sky dome formation, the pillar of heaven's mountains was safe. As long as no martial gods came, no one would be able to enter the dojo at the peak of the mountain. However, this was not enough. This was only the first step of Ji Tianqing's plan. He sat on the peak of the sword steel, bathed in the warm morning sun, and began to meditate. As he breathed, the white clouds and the morning sun around the pillar of heaven's mountains turned into spiritual energy and surged into his body. He was using a secret technique to gradually merge with heaven and earth. Only by breathing with heaven and earth and sharing fate with heaven and earth could he successfully use the chaotic heaven secret technique. The Burial of Heaven sword also shone with a 5-colored spiritual light. It continuously devoured the spiritual energy of heaven and earth, turning it into magic power and transferring it to Ji Tianxing. Of course, the Sky Dome formation was also operating silently, helping Ji Tianxing to gather the spiritual energy of heaven and earth within 100 miles. His entire body was wrapped in the five-colored spiritual light like a huge cocoon. As the spiritual energy of heaven and earth became denser, the five-colored light ball became more and more dazzling. After a few hours, he was already as dazzling as the sun, competing with the blazing sun in the sky. During this process, many disciples noticed that something was amiss. They could clearly sense that the peak of the mountain was protected by an invisible shield, as if the spiritual energy had recovered. Many people also noticed the abnormality of the dojo. They saw that the entire dojo was lit up, and the sacred sword steel in the middle of the dojo was also emitting a five-colored light. The disciples were very shocked. They cheered in surprise and ran to spread the news. In their eyes, the awakening of the dojo and the sacred sword was an auspicious move from heaven. In recent years, the pillar of heaven's mountains had been declining, and the situation had become more and more dangerous. A layer of haze shrouded the hearts of all the disciples. It was very heavy and very oppressive. No one could see any hope. They would only feel more and more despair. But now, everyone firmly believed that the heavens had opened their eyes and blessed the pillar of heaven's mountains. That was why such a miracle had appeared. Everyone's hearts were filled with hope as they silently prayed that the pillar of heaven's mountains would overcome this crisis and regain its glory. Of course, none of the disciples dared to step into the dojo. They all watched from afar, afraid that they would blaspheme the gods and the heavens. An entire day passed. When night fell, the five-colored ball of light at the top of the sword steel exploded with a bang. Countless streaks of five-colored spiritual light fell from the sky like a torrential downpour before quickly dissipating. The five-colored spiritual light that lingered on the sword steel also abruptly withdrew. The multicolored light that had been shining on the surface of the 100-kilometer-wide dojo also quickly faded away. Everything returned to normal, and the scene of auspicious signs descending from the heavens disappeared. However, only Ji Tianxing knew that the five-colored spiritual light signified that he had succeeded. With the help of the heavenly dome formation and the sword of burial of heaven, he had successfully unleashed the secret technique of chaotic heaven and merged with heaven and earth. The boundless spiritual chi and dermic powers merged into the world. His breathing and aura were also connected with heaven and earth, becoming undetectable. At this moment, he was sitting quietly at the top of the sword steel. His expression was neither sad nor happy, and his eyes were deep and indifferent. However, no matter who looked at him, they would feel the boundless spiritual chi of heaven and earth. Looking up at him was like looking up at the vast sky, looking at the vast earth. In their hearts, there was only awe and admiration. If a martial arts expert released their divine sense to investigate his background, they would find that he was as vast as heaven and earth, infinitely vast and boundless. They would not be able to determine his strength, depth, and boundary. Ji Tianxing slowly opened his eyes and habitually exhaled a mouthful of turbid air, ending this cultivation session. Suddenly, dark clouds appeared in the sky above the pillar of heaven's mountains, and a shocking hurricane blew, causing the dark clouds to surge like wave. The sudden change of heaven and earth gave many disciples a shock, and a strong sense of fear and worry arose in their hearts. Ji Tianxing was also stunned for a moment, and then he could not help but laugh. "Haha! Now that I have used the armillary heaven secret skill, I have merged with heaven and earth, and my every move is like the power of heaven and earth. No one can investigate my background, and no one can kill me except for the martial god. The heaven and earth is my incarnation, and unless someone can destroy the heaven and earth within 1,000 miles, I am invincible." After muttering a few words to himself, he stepped across the sky and landed below the sword steel. Burial of heaven, you preside over the operation of the firmament formation, and continue to recover. He reminded Burial of Heaven, and then quickly left the training hall and returned to the Pillar of Heaven's palace. After entering the secret chamber, he opened the space ring and took out the glazed treasure bottle. In the small bottle, there was the remnant soul of the white dragon god. He opened the bottle and used his divine sense to check the condition of the white dragon remnant soul. Although the remnant soul had swallowed a large amount of cultivation resources, and was stronger than before, it was still very weak. However, the remnant soul was still very weak and had yet to regain consciousness. Ji Tianqing held the glazed treasure bottle and thought to himself, relying on those cultivation resources, no matter how much I have, it will be difficult to help the white dragon recover. Only a divine-level elixir or great formation can help him recover his strength quickly. Unfortunately, the firmament formation needs to protect the Pillar of Heaven's mountain and help Burial of Heaven recover. If I want to help the white dragon recover, I can only rely on the power of the Star Divine Furnace. After making up his mind, he went to the conference hall and took the longevity vine. Then, he took the longevity vine and the glazed treasure bottle through the secret passage in the secret chamber, and landed in the Star Divine Furnace at the bottom of the Pillar of Heaven's mountain. The light in the huge and empty Star Divine Furnace was very dim. Only the torch-shaped platform in the middle was still lit with the Star Divine fire that was more than 6 meters tall. After the firmament formation was activated, the Star Divine Furnace also benefited, and its power increased, and the Star Divine fire became more vigorous. Ji Tianqing observed for a moment, and then started to set up the formation. The white dragon's remnant soul was too weak, and it could not directly absorb the Star Divine fire to recover its strength. Therefore, Ji Tianqing wanted to set up a great formation in the Divine Furnace to help the white dragon recover its strength. Also, to be on the safe side, he would sacrifice the longevity vine to replenish the white dragon's remnant soul's life force. Ji Tianqing focused on setting up the formation, and forgot about the passage of time. After half a day, he finally set up a great formation in the Divine Furnace. Then, he placed the glazed treasure bottle in the middle of the great formation, and put the longevity vine into the glazed treasure bottle. The glazed treasure bottle lit up with a dark green brilliance, and the white dragon's remnant soul also started to absorb the longevity vine's life force. At the same time, after the great formation was activated, it gathered strands of Star Divine fire and guided them into the glazed treasure bottle. Under the protection of the longevity vine, the white dragon's remnant soul gradually devoured the Star Divine fire and quickly recovered its strength. After settling the white dragon's remnant soul, Ji Tianqing returned to the secret chamber and focused on cultivating. Chapter 1891. A day and a night had passed. Ji Tianqing's dermic powers had reached the peak state and he stopped cultivating. There was a strong feeling in his divine soul. The third heavenly tribulation would descend today. To the current Ji Tianqing, the heavenly tribulation was no longer a dangerous thing. He only needed to go through the motions. After all, his true strength had reached the peak of the tribulation stage. Ordinary tribulation stage powerhouses needed to cultivate for hundreds of years before they could undergo the next heavenly tribulation. And he only needed 3 to 5 months or even less. Fortunately, I am now at the Pillar of Heaven's mountains and not on the Luotian mountain. Otherwise, I would definitely be treated as a monster if I were to undergo the third heavenly tribulation in just 2 to 3 months. Ji Tianqing thought so in his heart, and his lips curled into an inexplicable smile. He got up and left the secret room and walked to the training hall outside the Pillar of Heaven's mountains palace. It was early in the morning. The sky was clear and the sun was slowly rising. Thousands of miles of sunlight scattered on the mountain peak, reflecting the surrounding white clouds, making the Pillar of Heaven's mountains palace look magnificent, like a fairyland. However, when Ji Tianqing walked to the center of the training hall, the wind and clouds were surging. Endless gray clouds gathered from all directions, forming a thick layer of clouds above the Pillar of Heaven's mountains palace. The morning sun was covered, and the world became dark. The wind was raging and whistling, and the endless gray clouds gathered quickly, spinning rapidly to form a vortex. Many disciples were practicing in the morning or adjusting their breathing. Suddenly seeing this scene, everyone looked up at the sky, revealing deep worry and doubt. Not long after, the gray clouds in the sky formed a huge black vortex, faintly flickering with the brilliance of lightning. At this moment, everyone came to a realization and burst into discussion. So it's the tribulation cloud. Someone is going to undergo the heavenly tribulation. Strange, who is going to undergo the heavenly tribulation in the training hall? Why not go to the back mountain? Yes, the training hall is the sacred ground of our sect. How can that person undergo the heavenly tribulation here? What if the heavenly tribulation destroys the training hall? I haven't heard of any senior brother or senior sister undergoing the heavenly tribulation recently. Who is going to undergo the heavenly tribulation? Let's go and see what is going on. Many disciples and deacons rushed to the dojo to find out what was going on. A while later, more than 10 disciples and deacons had gathered at the edge of the dojo. Everyone gathered in groups of 3 to 5 to observe the situation in the training hall and whispered to each other. He saw Ji Tianxing, who was dressed in a white robe, sitting under the sword steel in the middle of the training hall. His eyes were closed as he silently cultivated. No matter how dark the sky was or how violent the wind was, he remained unmoved with an indifferent expression. Who is that white-robed young man? Why haven't I seen it before? Yes, that young master looks very holy. He doesn't seem to be a disciple of our sect. How strange. A stranger actually managed to barge into our sect, and even dares to undergo tribulation in the dojo? No. We seem to have seen that young master before. The day before yesterday, when a miracle appeared in the heavenly dojo and the auspicious sign descended from the heavens, that white-robed young master seemed to be there. Many disciples and deacons were discussing Ji Tianxing's identity and background. At this time, Zibai and Shohei rushed to the scene, and everyone made way. Shohei observed for a moment and then explained to everyone, "Everyone, don't make wild guesses. That white-robed young man is young Master Ji, the successor of our sect's founder, Kenshin. A few days ago, the great immortal personally wrote a letter to invite young Master Ji to help our sect through this difficult time." Hearing her say this, everyone suddenly realized. At this moment, the vortex of tribulation clouds high in the sky sped up and began to descend heavenly thunder. Boom! With a shocking sound of thunder, 300-meter-long pillars of lightning fiercely blasted towards Ji Tianxing. The 3 pillars of lightning were purple, blue, and gold. They contained the power of different attributes, and their power was very violent. Ji Tianxing sat motionless. Dazzling golden light gushed out of his body and formed a huge vortex above his head. The 3 pillars of lightning all blasted into the golden vortex, but they were swallowed without a trace. They couldn't hurt him at all. Seeing this scene, the disciples and deacons at the edge of the square all revealed a look of horror and exclaimed, "Oh my God! What kind of heavenly tribulation is this? Why did 3 heavenly thunders descend at once? I've lived for more than 200 years, and I've never seen 3 heavenly thunders. This is too strange. It's unbelievable." Young Master Ji didn't use any technique to resist and even swallowed the 3 heavenly thunders, as expected of the founder's successor. His heavenly tribulation is so strange, and his method of tribulation is also unimaginable. Just as everyone was full of amazement and whispering to each other, the second heavenly thunder descended. Boom! This time, 6 heavenly thunders struck out from the vortex of tribulation clouds. They were divided into 3 colors, and their power was 3 times stronger than before. However, Ji Tianxing still didn't move and sat calmly under the sword steel. The 6 heavenly thunders blasted into the golden vortex and were swallowed in the blink of an eye. Not long after, the third heavenly thunder descended. This time, there were 12 pillars of lightning, and their power was even stronger. The dazzling lightning tore through the dusky sky and illuminated the entire mountain peak. The violent and terrifying power enveloped the entire training hall. However, the 12 heavenly thunders couldn't break the golden vortex and were still swallowed by Ji Tianqing. The disciples and deacons standing at the edge of the training hall witnessed this scene with their own eyes, and they were incomparably shocked. Everyone's blood was boiling, and they were dazzled by the scene. They were incomparably excited. This heavenly tribulation was unprecedented, and it was an eye-opener for everyone. They could only call it a miracle. After the 3 heavenly thunders, the vortex of tribulation clouds changed, and a crimson color emerged from the black clouds. Boom! Following an earth-shattering explosion, 24 lightning pillars struck out from the vortex of tribulation clouds and struck towards Ji Tianqing. Each lightning pillar was composed of 4 colors, and their power was 4 times stronger than before. Moreover, the 24 lightning pillars were arranged in a special position, forming some kind of heavenly Tao formation that contained unparalleled divine power. Ji Tianqing stood up and formed a sword seal with both hands. He struck out 48 sword beams into the sky. Swish! 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 48 gigantic golden swords that were 1,000 feet long also formed a mysterious formation and blasted towards the 24 heavenly thunders. Bam! 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 The two collided, and a series of earth-shattering explosions erupted. All the sword beams shattered, and the lightning pillars also collapsed and dissipated. The golden light fragments and lightning arcs floated in the sky for a long time before disappearing. Next, the 5th and 6th heavenly thunders descended one after another. Within the vortex of tribulation clouds, 48 and 96 heavenly thunders struck down respectively. Such a large number of heavenly thunders struck down like a rain of arrows, and their power was so powerful that it could destroy the world. Countless disciples and deacons watched with trepidation, worry, and reverence. However, Ji Tianqing executed a sword Tao secret technique with all his might, releasing sword beams that filled the sky and destroyed the lightning pillars. Chapter 1892. The 6 heavenly tribulations had passed. The tribulation cloud vortex changed again and was dyed with a layer of blood. Obviously, the 7th heavenly tribulation, the inner demon tribulation, was about to arrive. Ji Tianqing straightened his clothes and looked up at the tribulation cloud vortex in the sky with a smile on his face. The inner demon tribulation was no longer dangerous for him. It would only help him recover more soul memories. Boom! Amidst the loud noise, a blood-red heavenly lightning struck down and hit him hard. However, there was no apocalyptic scene. Endless dark red blood light wrapped around Ji Tianqing, forming a huge blood-red light ball that floated in the sky. His soul entered the illusion and began to experience the inner demon tribulation. The people at the edge of the training hall were full of doubts and shock as they discussed. It was the first time for many people to see the inner demon tribulation, and it was the first time for them to see someone who could trigger 7 heavenly lightning bolts. After Ji Bai and Shou Hei's explanation, everyone understood what was going on. They were immediately amazed, and their hearts were filled with admiration and anticipation. About an hour later, Ji Tianqing finally resolved the inner demon tribulation. The blood-red light ball collapsed, and the dark red blood light dissipated. He recovered a part of his soul memories, and his aura became even more mysterious and ethereal. Not long after, the 8th heavenly lightning, the wind and fire tribulation, descended. In the tribulation cloud vortex with a radius of 100 miles, a lightning pillar that was thousands of feet long and looked like a divine dragon descended. Boom! The 5-colored pillar of lightning struck Ji Tianqing with a loud bang, turning into a monstrous thunderfire that engulfed him. The power of the divine lightning was extremely terrifying, enough to destroy the entire pillar of heaven's mountains. However, the The power of the divine lightning was only within 100 miles and would not spread outside the training hall. Ji Tianxing was wrapped in the 5-colored lightning fire and floated in the sky. He opened his arms and looked up at the sky. There were purple, blue, gold, and red heavenly lightning that surrounded his body and kept drilling into his head. There was a blazing white 9 heavens astral wind that wrapped around his body, cutting and tearing his flesh and blood apart. There was also a mysterious black flame that drilled into his body from his hands and feet, burning his blood and bone marrow. Even his internal organs and head were being burned by the mysterious black flames and lightning. Without a doubt, Ji Tianxing was using the great tribulation of wind and fire to temper his body. This process was extremely painful and dangerous, but he was duty-bound and persevered with his extraordinary willpower. Of course, he had used the great tribulation of wind and fire to temper himself before. With enough experience, his physical body was also very strong. Now that he was tempering again, the pain he felt was greatly reduced, and the tempering process was very smooth. Moreover, after he used the Armillary Heaven Secret technique, he could already transform into heaven and earth. His safety was absolutely guaranteed. 15 minutes later, the lightning, fire, and wind that enveloped his entire body gradually disappeared. Obviously, he had succeeded. His entire body flickered with a faint golden light as he emitted an aura of righteousness, causing everyone around the training ground to involuntarily prostrate themselves in worship. Although everyone was inexperienced and didn't understand what he had done and experienced, they still didn't understand. However, everyone knew that he had successfully passed the 8th tribulation. Since ancient times, martial artists who were able to attract 8 heavenly tribulations were at least able to become martial gods. As long as one wasn't a fool, they would know that this young Master Ji was definitely an unparalleled genius. Soon, the 9th tribulation lightning struck again. From the tribulation cloud whirlpool that was 100 miles in circumference, a 3,000-meter-long pillar of lightning that was as white as snow struck down. Kaboom! The strange snow-white lightning struck Ji Tianxing and turned into a ball of white light that was as big as a palace, enveloping him. His body instantly stiffened and stopped in mid-air, unable to move an inch. The snow-white ball of light enveloped him and floated silently in the sky. Many disciples and deacons were pleasantly surprised to see this scene. They whispered to each other, not knowing what was going on. Heavens! Young Master Ji actually attracted 9 heavenly tribulations. Since ancient times, only our ancestral master has been able to attract 9 heavenly tribulations. Now there's another person, young Master Ji. As expected of our ancestral master's successor. This young Master Ji didn't embarrass our ancestral master. He's definitely the #1 genius in the world. I hope young Master Ji can inherit our ancestral master's ultimate technique and restore our ancestral master's glory. This is really strange. Why is this tribulation so strange? A snow-white ball of light? The will of the heavenly Tao is not something that ordinary people like us can guess. Don't make wild guesses. Not only were the disciples and deacons confused, even Ji Bai and Shohei, who followed Ji Tianxing, had never seen this kind of tribulation before. Only Ji Tianxing knew that this tribulation was a special test given to him by the heavenly Tao. Just like the last tribulation, the last stage of the 6 paths of reincarnation tribulation. It could be said that this was a tribulation formed by the heavenly Tao against him. It could also be seen as a special care and test from the heavenly Tao. His soul was trapped in the tribulation and was lost in thousands of space-time. All around him was a pitch-black void, as well as all kinds of spatial barriers and gaps. Tens of thousands of large and small spaces were crowded in the void in an incomparably chaotic manner, waiting for him to travel and explore. Every space was a different world. Not only did they have different appearances, but even time was chaotic. and he was lost in the chaotic spacetime. He had to find the right path and return to the original point in order to survive this tribulation. Otherwise, his soul would be lost in the chaotic spacetime and would never be able to wake up. Ji Tianxing was in the void. He was pulled by the void storm and the black hole, and he couldn't help but travel through 30 layers of spacetime. He had completely lost his direction and couldn't find the origin. But he quickly calmed down and used the Divine Eye Mystic Technique to observe the surrounding spacetime. His Divine Eye Mystic Technique originated from the famous Golden Dragon King in the Dragon Realm. A pair of dragon god's eyes could see through all the worlds and see through all illusions and disguises. Even though Ji Tianxing wasn't a dragon, after cultivating the Divine Eye Mystic Technique, he only had 60% of the Golden Dragon King's mastery. But that was enough. Now that he was using the Divine Eye Mystic Technique, he didn't need to see through all the world. He only needed to see through thousands of layers of spacetime. About a day later, or a few months later, he finally saw through the surrounding spacetime and noticed some clues. Then, he used another secret technique, Heavenly Dragon's 7 Steps. This was a divine footwork that he created by combining the dragon race's secret technique. In the upper realm, it was also a divine technique that was worshipped by thousands of gods. Swoosh! Ji Tianxing took a step forward and passed through 3 layers of spacetime, appearing on the other side of the void. He took another step forward and passed through 5 layers of spacetime, including a few layers of folded space, and appeared in the void even further away. After 7 consecutive steps, he had quickly passed through more than 100 layers of spacetime without any delay, nor was he affected by the chaotic spacetime. Finally, he appeared in a pitch-black void. The void storm and black hole around him had disappeared. Not far in front of him, a beam of light appeared. It was like a cold star. He walked over and soon arrived at the light. He saw a blazing white door of light. After crossing the door of light, he left the chaotic spacetime, and his soul returned to his body. Chapter 1893. The dazzling white light that enveloped Ji Tianxing quickly collapsed and dissipated. The tribulation cloud vortex in the sky also shattered and dissipated, turning into a large ball of sacred golden light. Swoosh! The golden light poured down like a flood and enveloped his body. He opened his arms and accepted the baptism calmly, wantonly devouring the sacred golden light. After a full 100 breaths, he finally finished devouring the golden light. His magic power surged crazily. His physical body and soul were also strengthened. Now, he had reached the 3rd level of the tribulation stage, and his strength was 5 times stronger than before. Everything returned to normal. The gray clouds above the pillar of heaven's mountains dispersed, and the sky became clear again. The sun shone down golden light again. The disciples and deacons around the training hall cheered excitedly after witnessing Ji Tianxing pass through the 9 heavenly tribulations. This unprecedented heavenly tribulation shocked everyone, and it was enough to make them remember it for the rest of their lives. The one who shocked and worshipped the most was still Ji Tianxing. Not only could he attract the 9 heavenly tribulations, but he could also easily dissolve them. He was not injured from the beginning to the end. He could pass through the tribulations so easily. He was simply a god. This descendant of Kenshin would definitely create a miracle and bring hope to the pillar of heaven's mountains. The haze and despair in everyone's hearts were swept away. They looked forward to Ji Tianxing creating glory again and reproducing the power of Kenshin in the past. Ji Tianxing did not stay. After the tribulation, he left the training hall and returned to the Pillar of Heaven's Mountains Palace. He meditated in the secret chamber, stabilized his martial arts foundation, and practiced some secret technique. As he passed through the 3rd heavenly tribulation, he recovered more and more soul memories, and the secret techniques he mastered became more and more vast. It was no exaggeration to say that there were at least 5,000 secret techniques above the sage level in his memory, and most of them were divine techniques from the upper realm. As long as he could use these secret techniques well, he would not only be invincible below the martial sage level, but he could even fight against martial sages. Next, I'll wait for the 7 sects and 14 factions to walk into the trap. After I subdue the 7 sects and 14 factions and unify the area around the Pillar of Heaven's mountains, I'll be able to repair the 108 mountains and reactivate the 2 divine arrays. While meditating and adjusting his breath, Ji Tianxing silently calculated in his heart. What he wanted to do the most was to reactivate the 2 formations and restore the Pillar of Heaven's mountains to its former glory. The Pillar of Heaven's mountains had once again become a martial Dao holy land. Only then could he continue with his plan and let the Pillar of Heaven's mountains grow stronger. In the future, he would not attach himself to any divine kingdom. He wanted the Pillar of Heaven's mountains to regain its former glory and become the 4th great power, enough to contend against the Dark North Mountain. He had never forgotten that the ancestral devil god was his greatest enemy. The battle between the 2 of them had yet to truly begin. 3 days passed in a flash. Early in the morning, the sun had just risen and the Pillar of Heaven's mountains was peaceful. Ji Tianxing was meditating in a secret chamber, cultivating the universe creator. Suddenly, Ji Bai's voice sounded from outside the door. "Master, I have important news." Ji Tianxing heard his deep and dignified voice and knew that it was an important matter. He ended his cultivation and waved his hand to open the door to the secret chamber. Ji Bai quickly entered and reported, "Master, our sect scouts have just sent news that the 3 sects and 6 factions of the East have gathered a large number of experts and are rushing towards the Pillar of Heaven's mountains." Ji Tianxing slightly frowned and asked in a dignified tone, "How many people do the 3 sects and 6 factions have, and where are they now?" Ji Bai replied truthfully, "According to the scouts, they have around 600 to 700 people and are rushing over on 9 flying boats. They have already passed the East Mountain and will reach the Pillar of Heaven's mountains in at most 10 hours. "What?" Ji Tianxing frowned and asked in a deep voice. "The 3 sects and 6 factions only received the news after passing the East Mountain? Didn't our sect have spies near the Battle Dragon sect?" "This." Ji Bai hesitated for a moment and then lowered his head to explain. "The 2 spies that our sect placed in the Battle Dragon sect were discovered. They have already rebelled and joined the Battle Dragon sect." Ji Tianxing was startled for a moment and then his mouth hooked up into a cold smile. No wonder. He got up and left the throne and walked towards the door of the secret chamber. At the same time, he asked Ji Bai, "Does Huanglong know the news?" Ji Bai replied respectfully, "The scouts have already reported to the Great Immortal. I believe that after the Great Immortal receives the news, he will definitely gather everyone in the main hall for a discussion." Ji Tianxing did not say anything else and brought Ji Bai to the main hall. When the 2 of them entered the main hall, there were already many people gathered in the main hall. There was the Huanglong Taoist, the great elder Nie Tianchen, and 4 other elders. Everyone had already received the news and were discussing with a serious expression on their faces as they discussed countermeasures. Seeing Ji Tianxing's arrival, everyone let out a sigh of relief. They looked towards him and respectfully bowed. "Welcome, Master. Welcome, martial ancestor." Everyone stood respectfully in the main hall and looked at Ji Tianxing with eyes full of expectation. Everyone was imagining that he must have already prepared a countermeasure. Huanglong Taoist was the first to speak and asked, "Master, the people from the Battle Dragon sect, Seeking Heaven sect and Water Mirror sect are already impatient and are rushing over with murderous intent. In at most 10 hours, the flying boats from the 3 sects and 6 schools will arrive at the Pillar of Heaven's mountains. Master, how should we deal with them?" Ji Tianxing looked at him and calmly asked, "How are the results of your secluded cultivation these few days?" Huanglong Taoist did not hide and answered truthfully, Master, after disciple comprehended the perfect sword scripture, disciple was enlightened and my sword cultivation improved by leaps and bounds. Now, disciple can already use 16 swords. Ji Tianqing nodded with a gratified expression and asked, "The 7 sects and 14 schools are divided into 2 groups and both want to annex the Pillar of Heaven's mountains. Now that the 3 sects of the East have taken the lead, the 4 sects of the West must have received the news as well. Have they made any moves?" Huanglong Daoist's expression froze and he lowered his head in shame. "Master, the spy that disciple planted in the Boundless sect has been executed after his identity was exposed. Now we can't monitor the Boundless sect's movements and can only wait for news from the scouts." Ji Tianqing frowned and said expressionlessly, "By the time the scouts discover them, they will already be on their way to the Pillar of Heaven's mountains." Huanglong Daoist hurriedly apologized and said with a voice full of self-blame, "Master, please don't be angry. This disciple didn't think it through. This disciple will send more people now." Without waiting for him to finish, Ji Tianqing waved his hand and said, "It's useless to send spies now. When the 4 sects of the West hear the news, they will definitely take the opportunity to interfere and reap the benefit. If the 4 sects of the West come, it'll be good too. We can deal with them all together." Huanglong Daoist's eyes lit up and he asked expectantly, "Master, looks like you already have a foolproof plan to wipe out the 7 sects and 14 schools? Wipe them out?" Ji Tianqing raised his eyebrows and said in a playful tone, "Don't forget, the 7 sects and 14 schools are our subjects. We only need to subdue them. Why do we need to wipe them out?" Chapter 1894. Hearing Ji Tianqing's words, everyone immediately understood. He wanted to subdue the 7 sects and 14 factions, not exterminate them. The Huanglong Daoist and several elders frowned. They were a little nervous and doubtful, unable to believe it. "Master, there are as many as 600 to 700 people from the 3 sects of the East, and they are all elite disciples and experts. Our sect only has 200 people. How can we fight against the 3 sects and 4 factions? How can we subdue them?" The Huanglong Daoist frowned anxiously and advised Ji Tianqing, "There are still a few hours before the 3 sects of the East arrive at the Pillar of Heaven's mountains. Why don't we make arrangements before they arrive?" Ji Tianqing waved his hand and said with a dignified expression, "There's no need. I've already made arrangements. We just need to wait." Since he insisted on his opinion, the Huanglong Daoist did not say anything, and the elders did not dare to object. Everyone waited patiently in the conference hall. Only Ji Tianqing looked indifferent. He leaned on the throne and closed his eyes to rest. The elders were full of worry. Their eyes were solemn and nervous. Unknowingly, 10 hours had passed. It was evening. The golden sun set in the sky, sprinkling endless rays of light on the sea of clouds. At this moment, a huge 5-colored light ribbon cut through the sky and sped over from the east. 9 flying boats of different sizes were wrapped in the colorful light. The golden flying boat flying at the front was the largest. It was 100 feet long and more than 200 feet wide. It was completely golden. 2 huge golden dragon patterns were carved on the body of the flying boat. They were baring their fangs and brandishing their claws. This was the flying boat of the Battle Dragon sect. It was a low-grade saint-level Dharma treasure. It had a strong defense and was extremely fast. The 2 flying boats following closely behind the Battle Dragon sect were also more than 800 feet long. The carvings were very exquisite and beautiful. These 2 blue flying boats were the flying boats of the Seeking Heaven sect and the Water Mirror sect. They were supreme-grade tribulation Dharma treasures. Further behind, there were 6 smaller flying boats. They were arranged in 2 rows. Each flying boat was 500 feet long. Although they were considered exquisite, they could not be compared to the flying boats of the 3 sects. These were the flying boats of the 6 sects. They were of lower grades and weaker power. The 6 sects belonged to the 3 sects. They could only follow orders. After a while, the 9 flying boats flew over the sky and arrived outside the Pillar of Heaven's mountains. The 9 flying boats lined up in a row and stopped 1,000 feet away from the peak of the mountain, floating in midair. Swoosh, swoosh. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Swoosh, swoosh. Swoosh, swoosh. In just a few breaths, more than 20 people had gathered together, and all of them were powerhouses in the crossing calamity realm. The leader of the tribulation heaven swoosh swoosh. Swoosh, swoosh. Swoosh, swoosh. Swoosh, 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 swoosh. This person was tall and sturdy, and his white hair was tied into a ponytail. He wore a large purple cloak with a phoenix pattern on it, and his entire body emitted an arrogant and domineering aura. Tutu to swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. SWN of them swoosh. Swoosh. Swoosh, swoosh. He was the sect master of the Battle Dragon sect, the martial sage Tang Zhanlong. The 2 old men standing behind him also had a head full of white hair. Their sideburns were like frost, and their deep sunken eyes contained experience and wisdom. They were the sect masters of the Water Mirror sect and the Heaven-Seeking sect. Both of them had reached the 8th level of the Tribulation realm. Among the 6 experts, there were middle-aged men and white-haired old men. They were the sect masters of the 6 sects. These 9 experts were the leaders of the 3 sects and 6 schools. Tang Zhanlong, the martial sage, was the leader. The dozen or so tribulation heaven swoosh, 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 swoosh. They were the guardians and elders of the 3 sects and 6 schools. Tang Zhanlong stood in the sky and looked down at the Pillar of Heaven's mountains. He observed quietly. Although the sky was clear and nothing could be seen. However, he noticed that something was wrong and frowned. Strange. It is said that the protective array of the Pillar of Heaven's mountains was personally set up by Kenshin in the past. That protective mountain array was closed several hundred years ago. Why is it open again now? Hearing Tang Zhanlong's reminder, the sect masters of the Water Mirror sect and the Heaven-Seeking sect released their divine senses. Soon, they found that there was an invisible light shield between heaven and earth that protected the entire Pillar of Heaven's mountains. The 2 sect masters also frowned and began to discuss with a solemn expression. It is said that the protective array set up by Kenshin is the same as the Great Array of the 108 Peaks. They are both God-level great arrays. If the protective array of the Heaven's mountains is really opened, that invisible light shield, I'm afraid it will be difficult for us to break it. Yes, if we are blocked by the protective array of the Heaven's mountains, we can't even enter the Pillar of Heaven's mountains. How can we occupy the Pillar of Heaven's mountains? Hearing this, the sect masters of the 6 sects frowned and looked worried. Tang Zhanlong frowned and slowly raised his right hand. He clenched his 5 fingers into a fist and punched the Pillar of Heaven's mountains with all his strength. A golden light fist as large as a hill, carrying a terrifying impact force, fiercely hit the invisible light shield. Bang! The golden light fist hit the invisible light shield and exploded with an earth-shattering sound that spread over a radius of 100 miles. The fist light shattered with a loud bang, turning into golden fragments that covered the sky and covered the earth, spreading out in all directions like a torrential downpour. In the originally empty sky, a huge 5-colored light shield also appeared. It had a radius of a few hundred miles and enveloped the entire Pillar of Heaven's mountains. Although the 5-colored light shield was not thick, like a layer of translucent bubbles, its defensive power was extremely strong. That devastating punch had no effect on the defensive light barrier at all. It didn't even cause a single ripple on it. Tang Zhanlong's face immediately turned gloomy and his eyes were surging with a cold light. The 2 sect leaders and the 6 sect leaders were also whispering to each other with grave expressions as they discussed countermeasures. 10 breaths passed. There was still no movement on the Pillar of Heaven's mountains. Even the patrolling guards were nowhere to be seen. No one came to check the situation at all. Tang Zhanlong could not help but sneer. They are actually cowards? The dignified Pillar of Heaven's mountains has fallen to such a state. It seems that they are really at the end of their rope. They don't have the courage to fight us head-on. In that case, I'd like to see how long they can hold on." He made up his mind and waved his wide robe sleeves. He ordered in a deep voice, "All disciples of the 3 sects and 6 schools, listen to my order. Immediately control the warships and form a battle formation. Attack the mountain protection array with all your strength." As his majestic voice spread out, the more than 600 disciples on the 9 flying boats all moved. Swish, 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 swish. The flying ships lit up and began to change. They stretched out wide wings. The 9 flying ships connected together and immediately became a huge war fortress that could accommodate 2,000 to 3,000 people. Teams of masters and disciples jumped out of the flying ships and formed a battle formation on the wide wings. They joined forces to cast spells. Hundreds of disciples joined forces to cast spells and released thousands of fireballs, bombs, and sword shadows. They poured down on the pillar of heaven's mountains like a heavy downpour. Chapter 1895. Bang, bang, bang. The overwhelming attacks rained down on the pillar of heaven's mountains like a torrential flood, crashing onto the 5-colored light shield. The deafening sound reverberated in the sky for a long time. The violent and devastating air waves, mixed with the colorful brilliance of spells, formed a dazzling shockwave that spread in all directions. Such devastating attacks continued for a full 100 breaths of time without any signs of stopping. As long as Tang Zhanlong did not give the order to stop, the disciples of the 3 sects and 6 schools would not stop. Tang Zhanlong looked down at the pillar of heaven's mountains with a gloomy face. His eyes were filled with cold light and his fists were clenched tightly in his sleeves. The people of the pillar of heaven's mountains had not shown up and the defense of the heavenly dome formation had not been broken. He had a bad premonition. The sect leaders and the sect leaders looked down at the pillar of heaven's mountains. They were all full of anticipation as they whispered to each other. With the 3 sects and 6 schools joining forces and hundreds of disciples attacking together, the power is comparable to a martial sage's full attack. In my opinion, the pillar of heaven's mountains protective mountain formation will not last long before it is broken by us. That's right. The heavenly dome formation has been closed for hundreds of years. Its power is definitely not as strong as before. I don't know what method the Huanglong Taoist used to activate the heavenly dome formation. However, this means that the pillar of heaven's mountains is at the end of the road. As long as we break the heavenly dome formation, the pillar of heaven's mountains will be ours to slaughter. At that time, we will divide the Kenshin's unique skills and dominate the world. The pillar of heaven's mountains has been riding on top of everyone's heads for more than 1,000 years. It's time to be replaced. The sect leaders and the sect leaders were complacent. They were fantasizing about how to seize the treasures of the pillar of heaven's mountains after breaking the formation. Tang Zhanlong did not speak. He frowned as if he was thinking about something. Unknowingly, 15 minutes had passed. The hundreds of disciples attacked with all their strength for 15 minutes and had consumed a lot of their magic power. They looked tired and their attacks had slowed down. However, the 5-colored light shield that enveloped the pillar of heaven's mountains was still intact. There was not even a crack. Tang Zhanlong could not bear it anymore. He waved his hand and gave an order. Stop. Following his command, the hundreds of disciples from the 3 sects and 6 schools all stopped their attacks. The brilliance of the spells that filled the sky gradually dissipated, and the deafening noise gradually disappeared. The sky slowly returned to normal. The sect masters and sect masters were still a little confused as to why they had suddenly stopped attacking. However, when they saw that the mountain guarding formation was still intact, they understood the reason. Everyone's expression dimmed, and the anticipation and hope in their eyes quickly dissipated. Tang Zhanlong ordered with an expressionless face, "Pass down the order. Let the disciples of all sects rest and conserve their energy." The protectors and elders of the various sects hurriedly passed down the order. The sect leaders and sect leaders glanced at Tang Zhanlong in confusion and asked, "Sect Master Tang, why did you stop attacking at this time? We've just arrived at the Pillar of Heaven's mountains. We should break through the protective mountain formation and kill our way into the Pillar of Heaven's mountains. If we let the disciples rest where they are, it will definitely delay the time. If the 4 sects of the West arrive, our chances of winning will not be great." Tang Zhanlong did not turn his head. He looked coldly at the peak of the Pillar of Heaven's mountains and said in a deep voice, "The power of the heavenly dome formation is beyond our imagination. It is definitely not something we can break. If we continue to attack, it will only make the disciples waste their spiritual power. It will be meaningless. Instead of this, it's better to let the disciples conserve their energy. I will think of another way. As for the 4 sects of the West, they must have heard the news of our attack and will soon arrive. I think that the safest way is to wait and see. If we attack fiercely, I'm afraid that the 4 sects of the West will have an opportunity to reap the benefits." Tang Zhanlong's analysis was clear and logical. The sect leaders and sect leaders expressed their agreement and nodded repeatedly. Sect leader Shui Jing hesitated for a moment before saying, "Sect Master Tang, according to your words, we can only wait here? Just because of the heavenly dome formation, our plan that has been secretly planned for many years has been put on hold?" The other 2 sect leaders were also very unwilling. They stared at Tang Zhanlong and waited for his answer. Tang Zhanlong gently shook his head and said, "We have endured for so many years and carefully planned for more than 20 years. We waited until today to launch the attack. How can we give up just like that? Everyone, please calm down. I will contact our spy and ask him what is going on." The sect leaders and sect leaders immediately nodded in agreement after hearing this. Wen Tian's sect leader waved his fist and said with a murderous look, "If the spy can open the protective mountain formation, even if it is just a gap, we can immediately kill our way in." Sect leader Shui Jing also nodded and said, "Although we all know that we can't expose the spy unless it is absolutely necessary. However, we have carefully planned for so long just for today. If he can open the protective mountain formation, it will be worth it even if we expose our identity." Tang Zhanlong took out a compass from his spatial ring and cast a spell to activate it. He used a secret method to send a signal to contact the spy in the Pillar of Heaven's mountains. The sect leaders and sect leaders were ready. As long as there was a gap in the protective mountain formation, they would immediately rush in. At the peak of the Pillar of Heaven's mountains, all the disciples, deacons, and guards had already received orders to stay in their residence and not go out. No matter what happened outside, no matter what they heard, they could not show themselves before they received orders. In the conference hall of the Pillar of Heaven's mountains, Ji Tianqing leaned against the bronze throne, his face calm as he closed his eyes and rested. Ji Bai and Shou He stood behind the throne like 2 statues, guarding him loyally. Huanglong Taoist and the 5 elders sat on the left and right sides of the hall, waiting patiently. The hall was silent, and the atmosphere was rather oppressive. Outside the hall, there was a constant rumbling sound, and there were even rays of colorful light that lit up like lightning. Everyone knew that a strong enemy had attacked and was attacking the protective mountain formation with all their strength. Although everyone remained quiet on the surface, their emotions were very complicated. Not only the elders, even Huanglong Taoist could not help but want to go out and see the situation. However, Ji Tianqing did not say anything, so no one dared to act rashly. At this moment, the 3rd elder, who was sitting on the right side of the hall, suddenly frowned, and his eyes became very complicated. He hesitated for a moment before he made up his mind. He secretly looked around and saw that Ji Tianqing, Huanglong Taoist, and the 1st elder were all resting with their eyes closed. He quietly got up and walked out of the hall. Huanglong Taoist, who was resting with his eyes closed, suddenly opened his eyes and looked at the 3rd elder with a sharp gaze. he asked in a deep voice. "Third elder, what are you doing?" The third elder immediately stopped in his tracks, and his body stiffened. Chapter 1896. In the entire hall, only Huanglong Daoist knew about Ji Tianxing's plan. Therefore, he had been waiting patiently and secretly observing the elders. In the past, he would never believe that any of the elders would be suspicious. However, Ji Tianxing had warned him, so he was more careful. At this moment, he saw that the third elder's whereabouts were strange and his eyes were evasive. He realized that something was wrong, especially the third elder's excuse, which made him feel even more suspicious. Therefore, he asked in a low voice, "The guard captain sent you a message? What's wrong? Why didn't he report to the hall?" "This." The third elder was stunned and quickly explained, "Previously, you ordered everyone to stay in the residence and not leave, so he." Huanglong Daoist frowned and was about to refute the third elder. At this moment, Ji Tianxing, who had been resting with his eyes closed, waved his hand and said, "Huanglong, let the third elder take a look." Huanglong Daoist gave up and stared at the third elder sternly. He said, "Go and come back quickly." The third elder immediately felt as if he had been pardoned. He quickly cupped his hands and said, "Yes, master." After that, he quickly walked out of the hall and disappeared through the door. After running out of the hall, he suddenly sped up and flew to the residence as fast as lightning. His face was full of fear and he sneered. He thought to himself, so what if the old Taoist Huanglong is suspicious? I'll be free soon. As he thought, he sped up and flew to the palace at the edge of the Taoist hall. At this moment, everyone in the conference hall opened their eyes one after another, revealing complicated expressions. Ji Tianxing's lazy expression disappeared as he stared coldly at the entrance of the hall. A cold smile appeared on his face. Huanglong Daoist's expression was complicated and he sighed regretfully. Sigh. Master guessed it right. This old man had never thought that the third elder, who had always been honest and well-behaved, would actually be. This old man had misjudged. Ji Tianxing stood up, straightened his white robe, and coldly said, "The time has come. We should also go out and meet the people from the 3 sects and 6 schools." After saying that, he brought Ji Bai and Shou He out of the main hall. Huanglong Daoist, second elder, Feng Ping and Lang Jing quickly followed. Only first elder was the last to get up. He took a deep look at Ji Tianxing and looked at his back. His expression was a little gloomy, and a hint of fear flashed in his eyes. Although this person is the reincarnation of Kenshin, he is even more terrifying than the Kenshin of the past. Back then, Kenshin was only obsessed with martial arts and left the affairs of the sect to the Huanglong Daoist. And now, he is so scheming. After a while, everyone left the main hall and walked to the center of the training ground. At the same time, in a secret room somewhere in the palace, a middle-aged man in armor was bowing to the third elder as he reported the news. Third elder, sect leader Tang just sent a message with a secret method. He has something important to ask. The third elder frowned and said with a serious expression, "Li Ji, we have been under sect leader Tang for more than 20 years. In order to not arouse suspicion, we usually don't contact him easily. Why didn't sect leader Tang ask earlier? Why did he have to contact him today? Damn it! I have already aroused Huanglong Daoist's suspicion in the meeting hall. If they can't destroy Tianzhu Mountain today, Huanglong Daoist will definitely not let me go." The middle-aged man, named Li Ji, was the guard captain of Tianzhu Mountain. He took out a compass from his chest and explained, "Third elder, now is not the time to worry about these problems. The most important thing is that we have to help sect leader Tang. They have already killed their way to the mountain gate, but they are blocked by the protective mountain array. They can't break in no matter what. Sect leader Tang asked you if you have a way to destroy the protective mountain array or open a gap. If you can open a gap, even if it only lasts for a few breaths, it will be enough for them to kill their way in. At that time, Even if our identities are exposed, Tianzhu Mountain will be finished anyway. Hearing Li Ji's words, the third elder frowned and murmured with a gloomy expression, "Protective mountain array? Our sect's protective mountain array. Isn't it the firmament array set up by Kenshin? That firmament array was closed a few hundred years ago. When did it open again?" Li Ji was startled and said with uncertainty, "2 days ago, I heard from my guards that the sacred sword showed its spirit and light filled the sky. Maybe it was open that day?" The third elder frowned and said with a gloomy expression, "Could it be that the Huanglong Taoist opened the array? No wonder he asked me to protect the array at the back of the mountain 2 days ago and deliberately sent me away. That's not right. If he could open the array, he would have done it long ago. Why wait until now?" Thinking of this, he suddenly realized and his expression changed. It must be that Ji brat. He claims to be the reincarnation of Kenshin. Only he can open the firmament array. Li Ji's expression also became extremely ugly. He said hatefully, "I sent this news to sect leader Tang a few days ago, but he didn't reply to me. It seems like he didn't take it to heart." The more the third elder thought about it, the more frightened he became. He said with a ferocious expression, "Forget it, let's not care about this anymore. Since the Huanglong Taoist already suspects me, then let's go all the way, let's go to the dojo now. Even if we can't open the protective mountain array, we have to destroy the array and create a gap as soon as possible." Li Ji quickly nodded in agreement. "Okay. We've endured for more than 20 years. Today we can finally go all out." After saying that, the two of them quickly left the secret room and rushed to the dojo. Ji Tianxing, Huang Long and the rest came to the center of the dojo and stood under the 1,000-feet sword steel. Everyone looked up at the sky and saw the 9 flying boats lined up in a row, like a huge war fortress. Huanglong Taoist, Feng Ping, and Lang Jing's faces were filled with hatred, and their eyes were filled with murderous intent. Ji Tianxing's expression was calm. He slowly raised his right hand and made a few hand seals. Dozens of streams of light shot out. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. The colorful streams of light drilled into the ground and immediately lit up dozens of array patterns. Then, a gap slowly opened in the colorful light shield in the sky. This gap was very small, only the size of a washbasin, like a dog hole. Outside the colorful light shield, Tang Zhanlong and the other sect leaders had been waiting impatiently for a long time. Suddenly, they saw a gap in the light shield. Everyone was shocked, and their eyes shone brightly. "Look, there's a gap in the protective mountain array. It must be our spy who has started to act. Damn it, why is the gap so small? It's like a dog hole. Are we going to crawl in from there? What time is it now? Why bother about these things? It's good enough that there's a gap. What are you waiting for? This is a rare opportunity. Let's go in." The sect leaders and the sect leaders were all excited and eager to try. They could not wait to rush in and start a massacre. Tang Zhanlong glanced at the gap and then looked at the dojo at the peak of the mountain. He vaguely felt that something was not right. However, the gap in the array was right in front of them and could close at any time. Chapter 1897. In the blink of an eye, Tang Zhanlong led the 8 sect masters and the sect leader to the gap in the array. All of them were powerhouses. Naturally, they could use the secret method to shrink their bodies dozens of times or turn into a ball of light. Swoosh, swoosh. Tang Zhanlong took the lead and led everyone through the gap and into the protective mountain array. Then, more than 20 guardians and elders also shrank their bodies and entered the array through the gap. Hundreds of deacons and disciples also flew over in a grandiose manner and lined up to squeeze into the gap. However, before they could get close, the gap closed. Everyone was blocked outside the protective mountain array. There was nothing they could do. They could only return to the flying boat and wait patiently. Tang Zhanlong led the 8 sect masters and the sect leader, and more than 20 guardians and elders to the Taoist sanctum at the top of the mountain. The gap of the array suddenly closed, which made him feel even more uneasy. However, there was no turning back. He had already entered the pillar of heaven's mountains. There was no turning back. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. A burst of colorful light flashed. More than 30 powerhouses landed in the middle of the Taoist sanctum, under the sword steel that was thousands of feet high. At this time, a colorful light suddenly flashed on the empty ground 100 steps in front of everyone. Swoosh. Several powerhouses appeared out of thin air under the sword steel. They looked at Tang Zhanlong and the others coldly. Tang Zhanlong immediately frowned and looked over with a sharp gaze. He saw 9 powerhouses standing 100 steps away. The leader was a young man in a white robe. He was handsome and strong. He was exuding a mysterious and ethereal aura. Standing behind him was a white-haired old man in a yellow robe. He was holding a golden horsetail whisk in his hand. He was the Huanglong Taoist. Behind him were the 4 elders of the Pillar of Heaven's Mountains, as well as Ji, Bai and Shohei. Seeing this, Tang Zhanlong suddenly understood. The other party had been waiting in the Taoist sanctum for a long time. They had just used the camouflage skill to hide from them. Tang Zhanlong looked at Huanglong Taoist coldly. Seeing Huanglong Taoist's calm expression and a sneer at the corner of his mouth, Tang Zhanlong's heart suddenly thumped and he felt a strong sense of crisis. Everyone, be careful. Old Taoist Huang Long dared to wait for us here. He most likely set up a trap. Many sect masters, sect leaders, and guardian elders were on high alert. They secretly accumulated their dermic powers and guarded against Huang Long and the others. Of course, Tang Zhanlong was secretly on guard, but on the surface, he was still domineering, revealing a confident sneer. Huang Long, previously, you were protected by the Sky Dome formation and could still hide in the Pillar of Heaven's Mountains without coming out. Now that the Grand Array has been broken, this seat wants to see where you can still hide. Hearing this, Huanglong Taoist immediately revealed a contemptuous sneer and said in a playful tone, "Hide? Tang Zhanlong, do you think I need to hide? You, on the other hand, should be considering whether you can walk out of the Pillar of Heaven's Mountains alive today." Tang Zhanlong was immediately stunned and frowned fiercely. He smelled danger and crisis. Huanglong Taoist pointed at Ji Tianxing in front of him and said with a sneer, "Tang Zhanlong, open your dog eyes and look carefully. Who is this?" Tang Zhanlong had long known that a white-robed young man with the surname Ji had recently come to the Pillar of Heaven's Mountains. He claimed to be the successor of the Kenshin. Knowing that this person was only at the second stage of the Crossing Calamity Realm, Tang Zhanlong did not take him seriously at all. After arriving at the training hall, he only glanced at Ji Tianxing and did not look carefully at him at all. In his opinion, his only opponent was the Huanglong Taoist. As long as he got rid of the Huanglong Taoist, everyone in the Pillar of Heaven's Mountains would be at his mercy. At this moment, when he heard Huanglong Taoist's words, he immediately frowned and looked at Ji Tianxing. Ji Tianxing stood proudly with his hands behind his back. He looked at Tang Zhanlong with an indifferent expression. His deep eyes contained supreme divine power. An invisible sacred aura lingered around his body, making him as noble and majestic as a deity. When Tang Zhanlong saw Ji Tianxing's appearance clearly, his body suddenly stiffened and his face changed dramatically. His eyes were as wide as eggs. At that moment, he froze on the spot as if he had been petrified. His expression was as if he had seen a ghost. His eyes were filled with disbelief and horror. When the other sect masters and sect leaders saw Ji Tianxing's appearance clearly, some of them were full of doubts and did not know what had happened. However, there were also a few people who had seen Kenshin with their own eyes. They were stunned on the spot and were completely dumbfounded. Kenshin? Tang Zhanlong came back to his senses after a long while. He stammered in surprise and his tongue was almost tied. A few sect masters and sect leaders who recognized Ji Tianxing were also scared out of their wit. They subconsciously took 2 steps back, and were about to kneel down and salute. He is actually Kenshin? How is this possible? Kenshin has clearly fallen for thousands of years. How could he be resurrected? I don't believe it. I don't believe it at all. It must be an illusion. It's a disguise. Several sect masters and sect leaders were so scared that their minds went blank. They exclaimed incoherently and looked extremely terrified. Those protectors and elders who had never seen the Sword God before turned pale with fright when they heard the 2 words Sword God. Their hearts were filled with fear and reverence. There was a commotion in the crowd, and the murderous intent in everyone's hearts melted like ice. There was no other way. Kenshin's fame was mighty and brought too much pressure to everyone. It made them feel fear from the depths of their souls. Ji Tianqing stared sharply at Tang Zhanlong and shouted in a cold and dignified voice, "Tang Zhanlong, why aren't you kneeling when you see me?" His voice was like a thunderclap from the 9th heaven, reverberating in the dojo. Tang Zhanlong's body shook violently. He was so frightened that his heart trembled. Cold sweat broke out on his back and forehead. When Kenshin was in charge of Tianzhu Mountain, although he was the sect master of the Battle Dragon sect, he only had the strength of the Tribulation Crossing realm. He was not even qualified to meet Kenshin. In front of Kenshin, he was as weak as an ant. He was dispensable. Even after thousands of years, the awe and worship deep in his bones could not be erased. Tang Zhanlong's knees almost gave way and he was about to kneel on the spot. However, he was a martial sage after all. He immediately sobered up and straightened his back. "No. You're not Kenshin. The Kenshin from back then is already dead. You're just a descendant of Kenshin. You're just a kid in the Tribulation Crossing realm who looks like Kenshin." Tang Zhanlong shook his head and growled in a firm tone. Several sect masters, guardians, and elders suddenly sobered up and believed Tang Zhanlong's words. That's right. The dead can't be resurrected. He's definitely not Kenshin. Everyone, don't be fooled by him. He just looks like Kenshin. He's just a kid in the 2nd stage of the Tribulation Crossing realm. How dare he bluff here? I can kill you with one palm. Hee. No wonder old Taoist Huang Long was deliberately mystifying. He wanted to use this person to scare us. Unfortunately, his plan is going to fail. Today, no one can stop the destruction of Tianzhu Mountain. Chapter 1898. Tang Zhanlong's reaction had long been within Ji Tianqing's expectations. He knew very well that regardless of whether Tang Zhanlong recognized him or not, it was impossible for him to admit that he was Kenshin. After all, Kenshin's reputation was too loud and terrifying. Once he admitted that he was Kenshin, Tang Zhanlong's plan would be ruined and he would no longer be able to seize Tianzhu Mountain. Ji Tianqing's mouth evoked a sneer, and a cold light flashed in his eyes. You're ungrateful and rebellious. You've really been blinded and blinded. In that case, I'll make you give up completely. As soon as his voice fell, Ji Tianqing released an invisible divine power and swept toward Tang Zhanlong. Boom! Ji Tianqing's imposing aura pressure instantly blasted Tang Zhanlong and burst out with a dull bang. Tang Zhanlong's body shook violently, and his face turned green and white. His consciousness also appeared briefly blurred. However, he actually blocked Ji Tianqing's spiritual pressure with his powerful divine soul power. His body trembled a few times and returned to normal. You're just a kid who looks like Kenshin. How dare you try to suppress me? Tang Zhanlong held his head high and his body burst out with a dazzling golden light. He actually shook off the invisible divine sense pressure. I'm not just suppressing you. I'm going to kill you today and clean up the sect. Ji Tianqing sneered. His hands formed a seal and released dozens of spiritual lights into the large array under his feet. Suddenly, the heavenly dome array seemed to come alive and bloomed with hundreds of millions of colorful brilliance. A majestic aura that suppressed heaven and earth fell from the sky and suppressed Tang Zhanlong, many sect masters, sect leaders, and protectors. At this time, the heavenly dome array gathered the spiritual chi of heaven and earth within a radius of tens of thousands of miles and directly erupted with the most powerful power. The unparalleled divine power of heaven and earth, like a giant palm covering the sky, slammed down. This blow was like the arrival of the martial god. No one present could withstand it. Boom! In the deafening muffled sound, Tang Zhanlong, the 8 sovereigns, the sect leader, and more than 20 protectors and elders all knelt on the ground. Their knees smashed 2 pits on the ground. Everyone maintained the posture of kneeling and admitting their guilt. Their bodies were bent and their heads were lowered. Except for Tang Zhanlong, everyone's knees were crushed, and dark red blood gushed out. Tang Zhanlong suffered the strongest suppression force. His internal organs were directly shattered, and blood foam spurted out from his mouth and nose. His white hair was immediately stained with blood. He still stubbornly raised his head and tried his best to raise his neck. His eyes were wide open as he glared at Ji Tianxing. Who are you?" He tried his best to open his mouth. Blood and bits of internal organs gushed out from the corners of his mouth as he spoke with a hoarse voice. A martial saint had actually been suppressed by a great formation to the point that he could not move and his internal organs had been severely injured. Such a scene made everyone tremble with fear and disbelief. In particular, the 8 sovereigns, the sect leader, and the more than 20 protectors and elders were even more horrified. Ji Tianxing slowly walked towards Tang Zhanlong. The pressure on his body was getting heavier and heavier, and the murderous aura was also getting stronger. "Ha ha ha, who am I?" He sneered in a low voice and asked with a dignified expression, "More than 1,500 years ago, when the Pillar of Heaven's mountains was first built, a young man with a murderous aura climbed the Pillar of Heaven's mountains alone. It was a snowy night. He knelt on this training ground, unafraid of the cold and the wind and snow. He only begged to be my disciple and learn the sword skills from me. When he was young, his whole family was killed. He saw his parents being torn to pieces by his enemies. He vowed to take revenge. He lived only for revenge. Even if he died, he would send his enemies to hell. However, he was in a small sect. He could not learn any profound martial arts skills, and had no hope of revenge. I asked Huang Long to tell him that his murderous aura was too strong. He had a heart demon and was not qualified to be my disciple. However, he followed Bai Long's example and knelt on the training ground for 2 days and 2 nights. Ji Tianxing narrated in a low voice. Every word was like a drumstick, beating on Tang Zhanlong's heart. The more he heard, the uglier Tang Zhanlong's face became. His forehead was covered in cold sweat and his body was trembling. As he spoke, Ji Tianxing came in front of him. He looked down at his eyes and continued, "Later, I asked Huang Long to send this person down the mountain. However, out of pity, I asked Huang Long to give him half of the sword skills secret manual called the 8 Swords of War Dragon. Later, I heard that this person changed his name to War Dragon and mastered half of the sword skills secret manual. He even founded his own sect." When Ji Tianxing said this, Tang Zhanlong was on the verge of collapse. His eyes were as wide as copper bells. His pupils were filled with fear and awe. There was also a trace of astonishment. His body was trembling like a sieve. Sweat poured down his body like rain. His murderous intent and battle intent had vanished into thin air. They had all turned into shame and self-blame. He had already lowered his head, not daring to look into Ji Tianxing's eyes. His head was buried deep in his chest. His breathing had also become rapid and intense. His heart was suffering a great torment. Seeing this, many sect leaders, guardian elders, and sect leaders were enlightened. Everyone finally understood that Tang Zhanlong had such a past. It was no wonder that he had vowed to seize the Pillar of Heaven's mountain and seize Kenshin's inheritance. Kenshin had only given him half of the War Dragon Sword Skills secret manual and had allowed him to reach the Martial Saint realm. If he could obtain more of Kenshin's inheritance, wouldn't he have a chance to reach the Martial God realm? Ji Tianxing's expression became even more ghastly. His gaze sharpened as he asked in a low voice, "After 1,000 years, that person called War Dragon has returned to the Pillar of Heaven's mountain. He is still in this training ground, but he wants to destroy the Pillar of Heaven's mountain and seize his benefactor's inheritance. Tell me, does this person deserve to die?" Tang Zhanlong's body trembled as his white hair spread on the ground. He shook his head repeatedly and said, "No. Lord Kenshin. Senior Kenshin. Junior. Junior knows his mistake." Ji Tianxing ignored him and asked again, "What do you think this person has to destroy the Pillar of Heaven's mountain?" "Based on the half of the Sword Skills secret manual that I gave him, the 4 moves of the War Dragon Sword Skills. How can such an ungrateful person, who repaid kindness with ingratitude, be worthy of living in this world?" As his voice fell, he stretched out his right hand and shouted loudly, "Sword, come!" The sword steel not far away suddenly lit up with a golden light that shot into the sky, bursting with an incomparably sharp aura. Swoosh! A mysterious pitch-black sacred sword flew out from the sword steel and landed in Ji Tianxing's hand. Such a scene caused everyone in the training ground to turn pale with fright as they exclaimed in shock. The sacred sword! The sacred sword has actually appeared. Heavens! It's the legendary sword of the Burial of Heaven. Wasn't the sword of the Burial of Heaven taken away by Kenshin? Sure enough, Kenshin is here in person. Kenshin and the sacred sword have both returned. The Huanglong Taoist and several elders were indescribably excited and emotional. As for the experts of the 3 sects and 6 schools, they were completely stunned and had no choice but to accept the fact that Ji Tianxing was Kenshin. Ji Tianxing held the sword of the Burial of Heaven in his right hand and placed it on Tang Zhanlong's neck. Tang Zhanlong's psychological defense finally collapsed. His eyes turned red and were covered with a layer of mist as he shouted anxiously, "Lord Kenshin, please have mercy. I was muddle-headed and made such a big mistake. I'm a bastard, I repay kindness with ingratitude, I'm a despicable person. But please spare my life, Lord Kenshin. I know I'm wrong and I'll definitely repent." As he begged for mercy, Tang Zhanlong kowtowed with all his might. His forehead hit the stone floor with a bang bang bang, and he did not care about the blood that splattered from his forehead. "How will you repent?" Ji Tianxing asked in a deep voice as he held the sword against Tang Zhanlong's forehead. With just a light stab, Tang Zhanlong's head and mind would be pierced, his body and soul destroyed, and he would die on the spot. Chapter 1899. Hearing Tang Zhanlong's words, many sect leaders, and guardian elders exclaimed. No one would have thought that a martial saint would be forced to this extent. What shocked them even more was that Tang Zhanlong had such determination and courage. "Sect leader Tang, you can't do this. Sect leader, you've cultivated for more than 1,000 years to achieve what you have today. How can you destroy your own martial arts? Sect leader Tang, please reconsider. Sect leader, please apologize to Senior Kenshin. Our Battle Dragon sect surrenders. You can't destroy your own martial arts." Sect leader Shuijing, sect leader Wentian, and the guardian elders of the Battle Dragon sect all tried to persuade Tang Zhanlong. However, Tang Zhanlong did not waver. His expression was miserable as he revealed a cold, self-mocking smile. "Ha ha! Everyone, there's no need to persuade me. I've already made a big mistake. For me to reach this stage, I must pay a sufficient price to obtain Senior Kenshin's forgiveness." He slowly raised his head and ignored the sword of Burial of Heaven in front of him. He stared at Ji Tianxing and said in a serious tone, "Senior Kenshin, it was you who gave me half of the sword manual that allowed me to master the Battle Dragon 4 swords and kill my enemies with my own hands. I also founded the Battle Dragon sect. I was grateful and should have treated you with the respect of a master, but now I've done such a thing. I regret it. Junior's cultivation and attainments in the way of the sword are all thanks to you. Now I'll destroy my own martial arts. Take it as you taking back your kindness. This is the only way I can apologize to you." After saying that, Tang Jianlong closed his eyes with a determined expression. He slowly raised his hand and moved it towards the top of his head. The more than 30 powerhouses of the 3 sects and 6 schools suddenly felt their hearts in their throat. Their expressions changed drastically as they exclaimed, "Sect Leader Tang! Stop it! Sect Leader Tang, don't be rash!" However, Tang Jianlong turned a deaf ear to the crowd's exclamations and dissuasion. His right palm firmly struck towards the top of his head. If this palm hit, his lifetime's martial arts would dissipate and his soul would shatter. At that time, he would become a cripple and only have half a life left. Ji Tianxing looked at him indifferently. He didn't say anything. It was only when his right palm was about to hit the top of his head that Ji Tianxing used his mind to control the firmament grand array. A vast divine power descended, forming an invisible hand, locking Tang Jianlong's right arm. Shua! His right arm was immediately blocked and he could no longer move. His right palm was only half an inch away from the top of his head, and the surging golden light in his palm was almost touching the top of his head. However, this tiny difference was like a natural moat that he was unable to cross. He was immediately stunned. He slowly opened his eyes and looked at Ji Tianxing with a puzzled expression. Kenshin Senpai, you the experts of the 3 sects and 6 schools were also stunned. Then, they all let out a sigh of relief. Many people looked at Ji Tianxing with puzzlement in their eyes. Everyone could not understand. Wasn't Kenshin Senpai very angry and vowed to kill Tang Jianlong? Why did he block Tang Jianlong when he wanted to destroy his own martial arts? Could it be that destroying his own martial arts was not enough? Did he want to kill Tang Jianlong? At this thought, the experts of the various sects showed complicated expressions and their hearts tightened. Tang Jianlong also realized this. He showed a sad smile and said in a hoarse voice, "Well, the majesty of the sword god is not to be blasphemed. I have offended you, and I deserve to die. Since you are not willing to forgive me, I can only apologize with my death." He was completely desperate and no longer had any hope. He immediately activated his martial arts to shatter his soul and kill himself on the spot. He believed that as long as he apologized with his death, Kenshin would not make things difficult for the Battle Dragon sect. However, just as he was about to activate his martial arts, Ji Tianxing said expressionlessly, "Death is just a coward's escape. Do you think you can end it with your death? Then who will make up for it? Who will save you from your mistakes?" Suddenly hearing this, Tang Jianlong was stunned again and looked at Ji Tianxing in confusion. "Senior Kenshin, you mean?" He suddenly reacted and vaguely understood something. His eyes were surging with excitement. Ji Tianxing looked down at him and said in a deep voice, "Seeing that you are sincerely repentant, I will spare your life for the time being and allow you to redeem yourself by doing good deeds." This sentence just confirmed Tang Jianlong's conjecture, which immediately made him excited and showed a grateful smile of surviving a disaster. He quickly kowtowed and said in a sincere tone, "Thank you, Senior, for sparing my life. Thank you, Senior, for being magnanimous and being willing to give me a chance to redeem myself. Rest assured, Senior, I will never make the same mistake again. I swear to support Senior and the Pillar of Heaven's mountains. I am willing to serve you, even if I have to sacrifice my life." When the experts of the 3 sects and 6 schools saw this result, they immediately revealed a grateful expression and were finally relieved. Ji Tianxing expressionlessly took back the Burial of Heaven sword and waved his hand to release a ball of silver flame, which flew towards Tang Jianlong's forehead. Tang Jianlong did not dodge and let the ball of silver flame enter his forehead, and enter his divine soul. He was very clear that since Kenshin said he would not kill him, he would not take his life. If Kenshin really wanted to kill him, he would have been dead on the spot and would have no chance to resist. Ji Tianqing said indifferently, "This ball of starfire seed will lurk in your divine soul for half a month. After half a month, if I don't take it out personally, the fire seed will explode and the starfire will destroy your divine soul. You should understand what I mean." Tang Zhanlong quickly nodded and said, "I understand what to do. Please rest assured, Senior." "Very good." Ji Tianqing nodded slightly and expressed his satisfaction with Tang Zhanlong's attitude. Then, Ji Tianqing raised his head and looked at the experts of the 3 sects and 6 schools. He pointed the burial of heaven's sword at them and said in a deep voice, "Those who surrender, kneel. Those who do not surrender, die." The cold voice spread out like a knife, causing everyone's body to tremble as if they had fallen into an ice cellar, and they felt cold all over. More than 30 experts revealed awe and fear in their eyes, and their expressions were quite complicated. If they knelt and surrendered, all their efforts and plans would be in vain. Many people were unwilling. However, even Tang Zhanlong, a martial sage, could not resist the power of Kenshin and could only obediently surrender. Who dared to refuse? So, more than 30 experts knelt down and saluted in unison. The remaining sect leaders and protectors hesitated for a moment and then knelt down. "We know our mistakes and repent. We swear to be loyal to the Pillar of Heaven's mountain. We only ask for Senior Kenshin's forgiveness and allow us to redeem ourselves." Everyone respectfully knelt on the ground and shouted in unison. Just like that, the 3 sects and 6 schools were subdued by Ji Tianqing easily and without shedding a drop of blood. Huanglong Taoist and several elders smiled proudly and respected Ji Tianqing more and more. Chapter 1900. The powerhouses of the 3 sects and 6 schools only surrendered verbally. How could Ji Tianqing believe them so easily? He waved his hand and shot out a few clusters of starfire seeds, implanting them into the divine souls of several sect leaders. In this way, the leaders of the 3 sects and 6 schools were under his control, and their lives were in his hands. After doing all this, he turned around and left with everyone, walking towards the great meeting hall. But at this moment, Ji Tianqing's divine sense suddenly sensed that there were 2 sneaky figures flashing by the edge of the Taoist hall. They were 2 powerhouses in the tribulation stage. They had been lurking at the edge of the Taoist hall, secretly observing the situation. At this moment, seeing that everyone was going to the conference hall, the 2 of them hurriedly left and wanted to hide. Ji Tianqing only scanned with his divine sense and guessed the identity of the 2 people. A cold light flashed in his eyes. He stopped and ordered the Huanglong Taoist beside him, "Go and catch the 2 moles." The Huanglong Taoist immediately took the order and teleported out. After a few breaths, he arrived at the edge of the Taoist hall and entered a palace. Ji Tianqing stood in the Taoist hall and waited. Tang Zhanlong and many powerhouses could only wait. However, Tang Zhanlong and the leaders of the various sects heard Ji Tianqing's words. Only then did everyone remember the moles. They could not help but change their expressions, their hearts thumped, and their mood became uneasy. Not long after, the Huanglong Taoist returned with 2 people in his hands. The person on his left was a purple-robed old man, who was the 3rd elder. The person on his right was a middle-aged man in armor, who was the captain of the guards, Li Ji. Both of them were sealed by the Huanglong Taoist and became weak ordinary people. They were carried in his hands like 2 chicks. "Master, the moles have been caught." Huanglong came in front of Ji Tianqing and threw the 3rd elder and Li Ji on the ground. Everyone looked over and focused their eyes on the 2 of them. Everyone's eyes were quite complicated. The people of the Tianzhu mountain looked at them with hatred and disdain. As for the experts from the 3 sects and 6 schools, their gazes were somewhat evasive, and their expressions were also complicated. Ji Tianqing glanced at the 3rd elder and Li Ji, then turned to look at Tang Zhanlong behind him and asked, Tang Zhanlong, you know these two people, right? Tang Zhanlong immediately lowered his head and bowed in fear and trepidation, but he did not know what to say. The third elder and Li Ji rushed to his side and shouted anxiously, Sect Master Tang, please save us. Our identities have been exposed. Please save us and get us out of here. Tang Zhanlong stood motionless in the same place, looking indifferent. The third elder and Li Ji were stunned for a moment. However, upon seeing Zhang Xian's reaction, they immediately understood what was going on. Sect Master Tang? We've been loyal to you for more than 20 years, and we've done so much for you, yet you're going to stand by and watch us die? Tang Zhanlong, you useless fellow, could it be that you were scared by Ji Tianxing and have already surrendered? Have you forgotten the original intention of this operation? Are you going to give up the plan that you've been preparing for decades? The third elder and Li Ji had rushed to the edge of the Taoist sanctum, only to find that the two sides were confronting each other under the sword steel. The two of them were still wondering how Tang Zhanlong had broken the protective array. The two of them did not dare to act rashly, so they hid at the edge of the Taoist sanctum and secretly observed the situation. They did not hear clearly what Ji Tianxing and Tang Zhanlong had said to each other. The two of them were also confused about what had happened. But now, seeing the reaction of Tang Zhanlong and the experts of the various sects, the third elder and Li Ji finally understood. There was no doubt that the 3 sects and 6 schools had surrendered to Tianzhu Mountain. The third elder and Li Ji felt as if they had been struck by lightning, and a monstrous sense of grief and indignation surged from their chests. Tang Zhanlong, you wretched old bastard! You've caused us to expose our identities, and now you're begging to surrender, wagging your tail and begging for mercy. What bullshit, martial sage expert! You shameless old bastard! How dare you betray us? The two of them cursed and glared at Tang Zhanlong with ferocious faces, wishing they could tear him into pieces. Tang Zhanlong was scolded badly, but he could only lower his head and remain silent, unable to defend himself. His eyes were as gloomy as ice, and his face was as black as the bottom of a pot. His mood was extremely complicated. The experts of the various sects were also extremely embarrassed and lowered their heads in shame. This result was too embarrassing. After the third elder and Li Ji roared for a while, Ji Tianxing said expressionlessly, Someone has made a big mistake, and someone must shed blood to atone for it. Tang Zhanlong, you've bribed these two people, and now I'll let you deal with them. Hearing this, Tang Zhanlong's body shook, and he asked with an embarrassed expression, Let me deal with them? He hesitated for a moment, then cupped his hands and asked, Senior, I'll abolish their cultivation and drive them down the mountain. What do you think? Ji Tianxing did not bother to pay attention to him at all, and turned to leave with an expressionless face. Several elders of Tianzhu Mountain, Ji Bai and Shohei, and the experts of the various sects all followed Ji Tianxing and left. Tang Zhanlong was stunned, and he did not know what to do. He could not figure out Ji Tianxing's meaning. Fortunately, the Huanglong Taoist stayed. He patted Tang Zhanlong's shoulder and said earnestly, You must think carefully about what Master said. Don't make any more mistakes, or it will be too late to regret. After saying this, the Huanglong Taoist also left. Only Tang Zhanlong, the third elder, and Li Ji were left in the Taoist sanctum. Tang Zhanlong frowned and carefully recalled Ji Tianxing's words. After pondering for a moment, he suddenly understood. Someone must shed blood to atone for this. Thinking of this, a golden light flashed in his palm, and a golden dragon sword appeared. He held the golden sword and walked toward the third elder and Li Ji, and said with a complicated expression, Third elder, I'm sorry. Someone must be sacrificed today to appease the anger of Senior Kenshin. The third elder and Li Ji rolled and crawled backward, cursing with a ferocious face. Tang Zhanlong, you will die a horrible death. You treacherous guy, you will go to hell after death. We are loyal to you, but in the end you want to kill us. Are you still human? You despicable beast! Tang Zhanlong walked forward step by step, and the guilt on his face gradually dissipated. His eyes gradually became cold and firm. I have made a mistake once, and I almost lost my life because of it. In the past, I was blinded by greed and became an ungrateful villain. Fortunately, Senior Kenshin showed mercy and spared my life. Now, I will not make the same mistake again. I'm sorry, I can only send you on your way. When his voice fell, he waved the golden sword in his right hand, and a sharp sword light pierced out. Swoosh! The sword light instantly pierced through the third elder's forehead, destroyed his divine soul, and flew out from the back of his head and pierced into Li Ji's forehead. The golden sword light dissipated, and 2 blood flowers splashed out and flew into the sky. The third elder and Li Ji's cursing stopped abruptly, and their vitality quickly dissipated, and they fell to the ground one after another. Chapter 1901. In the main hall of the Pillar of Heaven Palace, Ji Tianxing sat on the bronze throne, while Ji Bai and Shou Hei stood respectfully on both sides of the throne. The Huanglong Daoist, a few elders, the sect masters of the various sects, and more than 30 experts stood on both sides of the main hall. Everyone stood respectfully with their heads lowered in silence. No one dared to talk or make a ruckus. Ji Tianxing's gaze swept across the crowd as he spoke in a calm and low voice. I believe everyone understands that the 4 sects of the Western region will definitely rush to the Pillar of Heaven Mountain upon hearing the news. Now let's discuss the countermeasures. I hope everyone can brainstorm together. As his voice fell, the sect masters and sect masters of the various sects looked at each other and whispered to each other. When everyone surrendered, they had already expected this situation and guessed that they would cooperate with the Pillar of Heaven Mountain to resist the invasion of the 4 sects of the Western region. Therefore, everyone was not surprised as they were already mentally prepared. Ji Tianxing leaned on the throne with an indifferent expression as he quietly waited for everyone to come up with a plan. In fact, he had already made the corresponding plans and preparations, and he was confident enough. The reason why he said this was to see the reactions of the various sects and to test everyone's attitude. A moment later, a sect master of a certain sect stood out and cupped his hands towards Ji Tianxing. Senior Kenshin, this subordinate is stupid and does not have a brilliant plan, but I have a sincere heart. This junior thinks that the flying ships and hundreds of elites of the 3 sects and 6 schools should stay outside the formation and form a battle formation to face the 4 sects of the Western region. If the 4 sects of the Western region dare to invade, we will join forces to attack and give them a heavy blow. This person's speech received the approval of several sect masters and protectors. Everyone nodded in agreement and expressed to Ji Tianxing that they were willing to charge and break through the enemy lines to protect the Pillar of Heaven Mountain. The sect master of heaven-seeking sect hesitated for a moment before he stood out and cupped his hands. Senior Kenshin, this subordinate thinks that this is inappropriate and needs to be discussed again. Although we have already surrendered and are willing to serve the Pillar of Heaven Mountain, even if we have to sacrifice our lives. However, there is no need for us to make unnecessary sacrifices. A head-on battle is extremely disadvantageous to us. This subordinate thinks that we can pretend to attack the Pillar of Heaven's mountains, and when the 4 Western sects launch their attack, we can then launch a surprise attack. Many experts' eyes lit up when they heard this. They all felt that this was feasible. Everyone looked at Ji Tianxing expectantly, waiting for him to make a decision. Ji Tianxing did not express his opinion. He looked at Tang Zhanlong calmly and asked, Tang Zhanlong, do you have any ideas or plans? Everyone's eyes were focused on Tang Zhanlong. They were secretly worried for him. Everyone understood that this was a test given to him by Lord Kenshin. It was also his first chance to redeem himself after surrendering. Tang Zhanlong was about to blurt out that he swore loyalty to Tianzhu Mountain and was willing to charge and break through the enemy lines. However, he suddenly remembered Huanglong Daoist's reminder and immediately shut his mouth. He lowered his head in silence. After pondering for a moment, he finally understood Ji Tianxing's meaning. Thus, he took 2 steps forward, cupped his hands and saluted, saying, "Zhanlong is slow-witted and has no good plan. I'm only willing to listen to Lord Kenshin's orders." However, Zhanlong boldly speculates that Senior's intention is not to destroy the 4 Western sects, but to subdue them. If both sides fight, there will definitely be casualties and losses, which will be disadvantageous to the future development of the Pillar of Heaven's mountains and us. Even if we destroy the 4 Western sects, it will be useless. We still need to send people to guard the dozens of spiritual veins. If we can subdue them without shedding any blood, we can restore the structure of the 9 sects and 18 factions, and then restore the array of the 108 peaks, which will promote the development of the Pillar of Heaven's mountains. Tang Zhanlong's tone was solemn. He spoke neither too fast nor too slow. His words were clear and logical. When the experts heard this, they came to a sudden realization and were enlightened, and they couldn't help but nod in agreement. Ji Tianxing was still calm and collected. He continued to ask, "Then, in your opinion, how can we subdue the 4 Western sects without shedding any blood?" Tang Zhanlong hesitated for a moment before he spoke. This subordinate believes that Lord already has a plan and strategy in mind. However, since Lord asks, this subordinate can only answer truthfully. The method of subduing the 4 Western sects is the same as the method of subduing the 3 sects and 6 factions. Ordinary disciples and elites don't need to be bothered. Only the leaders and experts of the various sects are allowed in. With Lord's divine power, you can easily subdue the leaders of the various sects and make them willingly surrender. Upon hearing this, Ji Tianxing's eyes flashed with a touch of gratification. He nodded and said, "Well, your idea is good. It's exactly what I want." After receiving Ji Tianxing's affirmation, Tang Zhanlong immediately felt relieved and heaved a sigh of relief. He was a little excited and knew that he had made the right bet. He truly understood Kenshin's intention. The experts of the various sects were secretly delighted and were looking forward to the next good show. After all, this was how they were subdued. They wanted to see how the experts of the 4 Western sects would react when they saw Lord Kenshin. Not long after, the defense of the Pillar of Heaven's mountains was completed. The flying boats and hundreds of disciples of the 3 sects and 6 factions entered the Pillar of Heaven's mountains and settled down in a few courtyards. Many experts stayed in the conference hall, waiting for orders and dispatches at any time. The heavenly dome formation was still operating, maintaining its invisible state and protecting the entire Pillar of Heaven's mountains. On the surface, the Pillar of Heaven's mountains looked calm as usual, as if it had not experienced any war and killing. Everyone waited patiently. A day passed quickly. The next morning, the sun had just risen. In the western sky, there was a colorful stream of light, like a cloud, flying over. In the stream of light that stretched for 10 miles, there were a total of 12 flying boats of different shape. The first 4 flying boats that flew over were all hundreds of feet long, like a huge warship. The warship's shape was exquisite and beautiful, exuding a majestic dermic power fluctuation, showing a majestic aura. These 4 warships were engraved with sect emblems and hung with sect flags. They were the Boundless Sect, Flying Crane Sect, Red Cloud Sect, and Purple Extreme Sect. Following behind the 4 warships were 8 smaller flying boats. However, these flying boats were agile, and also had decent combat strength. Each flying boat was shining with spiritual light, with different sect flags fluttering. In just a few dozen breaths, the 12 warships and flying boats flew from the horizon to the vicinity of the Pillar of Heaven's mountains and stopped 10 miles to the west. The Boundless Sect's golden warship was the most majestic. As the leader of the 4 sects and 8 factions, it was naturally at the front. The warships of the other 3 sects followed closely behind. The 8 flying boats were also behind the warships, waiting for orders and dispatches at any time. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. A colorful light flashed, and more than 30 experts flew out from the warships and flying boats and gathered in the sky. The leader was a middle-aged man in a white robe with a pale face, exuding a gloomy aura. Chapter 1902. Aniwuya stood in the sky with an indifferent expression while holding a green jade flute in his hand. The cold wind blew and ruffled his long white hair, making him look even colder and more desolate. The 11 sect masters and sect masters surrounded him. More than 20 protectors and elders were also clustered around him. Everyone looked down at the peak of the Pillar of Heaven's mountains. Their faces were filled with doubt as they searched around with their keen eyes. Hey, didn't the 3 sects of the East attack? That's strange. Where are the 3 sects and 6 schools? Why can't I see anyone? What is Tang Zhanlong doing? Have the 3 sects and 6 schools conquered Sky Pillar Mountain? All the experts were filled with doubts as they whispered to each other. Aniwuya didn't say anything. He secretly released his divine sense to check the surroundings. Suddenly, he felt something strange and his eyes became gloomy. He raised his left hand and punched out a huge 5-colored palm towards the peak of the Pillar of Heaven's mountains. The 5-colored giant palm flew halfway and was blocked by a layer of invisible shield. Bang! With a deafening muffled explosion, the 5-colored giant palm collapsed on the spot and exploded into light fragments that blotted out the sky and covered the earth. In the originally empty sky, a light barrier with a radius of a few hundred miles appeared out of thin air, enveloping the entire Pillar of Heaven's mountains. Seeing this scene, all the experts revealed looks of astonishment, and another wave of clamorous discussion broke out. Is that the Mountain Protection Array? Since when did Sky Pillar Mountain have a Mountain Protection Array? That's strange. I heard that the Mountain Protection Array of Sky Pillar Mountain was closed hundreds of years ago. It is said that Kenshin set up the Sky Dome Array. It can protect Sky Pillar Mountain for thousands of years and is extremely powerful. How can it be reactivated after hundreds of years? Who has the ability to reactivate it? Some people had heard about the history of the Sky Dome Array and knew that the Divine Array was extremely powerful. Some experts didn't know about the legend of thousands of years ago and didn't take the array seriously. On the other hand, Aniwuya and the other sect leaders knew how powerful the Heavenly Dome formation was. Their faces darkened at once. The Flying Crane sect master frowned and probed. Sect Master Wuya, if the Sky Pillar Mountain could activate the Sky Dome formation, they would have done so hundreds of years ago. Why wait until now? So I'm guessing that it's probably the doing of the 3 great sects of the East. The Scarlet Cloud sect master glanced at him and said in disbelief, You mean that the 3 eastern sects have already occupied the Pillar of Heaven's mountains? Sect Master Purple Extreme nodded his head with a solemn expression and said, It's very likely. When we received the news, the 3 eastern sects had already moved out. Looking at the time, they should have reached the Pillar of Heaven's mountains yesterday. Perhaps they would have breached the Pillar of Heaven's mountains within a few hours. Hearing this, the sect leaders and protectors all showed expressions of righteous indignation. Then what are we waiting for? Take this opportunity to break through the mountain protecting formation and snatch the Pillar of Heaven's mountains. The 3 eastern sects are so despicable. They actually snatched the Pillar of Heaven's mountains before us. This is like snatching food from a tiger's mouth. We can't let them gain a foothold. We have to attack immediately. The 4 sects and 8 schools' armies have just arrived. Our morale is at its peak. Now is the best time to attack. Everyone's opinions and thoughts were surprisingly consistent. Aniwuya raised his hand and calmed everyone down. He held the jade flute in his right hand and pointed at the peak of the Pillar of Heaven's mountains. He ordered in a dignified tone, Disciples of the 4 sects and 8 schools, listen to my order. Immediately form a battle formation and join forces to attack the mountain protecting formation. Whoever can be the first to rush in will be rewarded with tens of millions of resources. All the sect leaders cupped their hands in obeisance and immediately went to pass on the order. Soon, the 12 warships formed a battle formation in the sky. Each warship extended a pair of wings and lit up with a bright brilliance, releasing a powerful array formation power. Hundreds of elite masters and disciples flew out of the warships and quickly formed a battle formation. Following Wuya's order, the 1,500 elite disciples joined forces to cast a secret spell, casting a spell that blotted out the sky and covered the earth, pouring down on Sky Pillar Mountain. The sky was full of saber light and sword shadows. All kinds of light pillars of ice and fire shot out like a rain of arrows, bursting out with destructive power. Boom, 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 boom. More than 1,000 people joined forces to release spells and continuously bombarded the mountain-protecting formation, creating earth-shattering sound. The huge 5-colored light shield was immediately shaken by the bombardment. Light flickered and layers of ripples spread out. The violent shockwave turned into a 5-colored torrent that spread out in all directions and swept across the sky for hundreds of miles. Such a mighty attack was absolutely unprecedented in history. It was spectacular to the extreme. Many sect leaders, and elders were dazzled by the sight, their hearts surging with excitement. Our 12 great sects have joined forces and gathered more than 1,500 elite disciples. We are absolutely invincible. That's right. We have carefully planned this for so long. The Pillar of Heaven's mountains must be ours. The 3 sects of the East are nothing. Once we break the mountain-protecting formation, we can kill our way into the Pillar of Heaven's mountains and catch them all in one fell swoop. Sect leaders, guardians and elders, don't be idle. Let's join forces to attack the mountain-protecting formation and try to kill our way into the Pillar of Heaven's mountains as soon as possible. Soon, more than 30 powerhouses in the Tribulation stage joined forces to release destructive spells and launched a fierce attack on the mountain-protecting formation. The colorful light shadows of spells continued to sprinkle on the peak of the mountain, illuminating the sky for hundreds of miles. The deafening sound was like a thunderclap, reverberating endlessly in the sky. Except for Wuya, everyone was using all their strength to release spells recklessly. However, the huge 5-colored light shield trembled for a quarter of an hour, but it didn't shatter. No matter how powerful the spells were, the 5-colored light shield could absorb the power of the spells and transmit it to the heavens and earth, quickly dissolving it. The earth-shattering attack continued for a full half an hour without stopping. There was not even a crack on the 5-colored light shield. It was still safe and sound. The expressions of the sect leaders and elders of the various sects gradually became solemn, and the hot blood in their chests gradually cooled down. They finally realized that the defensive power of the 5-colored light shield was far beyond their imagination. Wuya's expression also became more serious. He murmured in a cold voice, "It is indeed a genuine heavenly array. It is worthy of being a divine array set up by Kenshin himself." He waved his sleeve and ordered the attack to stop. Disciples of the 4 sects and 8 factions, stop attacking immediately and rest. The attacks of more than 1,500 people came to an abrupt stop. The sky full of spells also gradually dispersed. Countless disciples' faces were pale and their breaths were weak. They hurriedly took out elixirs and consumed them to restore their dermic powers. Wuya held the jade flute and flew to the 5-colored light shield. He cast spells with a serious expression, waving the jade flute to release light shadows. Star cut. He finally made a move himself. Moreover, the secret technique he used originated from the Sword God's teachings. Chapter 1903. Swish, swish, swish. Bai Qing waved his jade flute and shot out hundreds of beams of light, which formed a mysterious seal. After 2 breaths, the seal was completed. It looked like a huge golden talisman. When the seal released an invisible force, silver light spots fell from the sky and gathered in the talisman. That was the power of the stars absorbed by the seal. Soon, the talisman became silver and powerful. Slash! And Iwea shouted coldly as he formed a seal with his left hand and waved his jade flute with his right hand. The 30-meter-tall silver talisman instantly transformed into a 30-meter-long silver sword and slashed viciously at the mountain-guarding Grand Array. Such a powerful and terrifying starry sword light caused the crowd to cheer. Many disciples had looks of worship on their faces. Kaboom! In the next moment, the huge starry sword light fell from the sky and slashed at the 5-colored light shield. There was a thunderous sound. Suddenly, the starry sword light shattered into silver light and spread in all directions. The violent energy exploded, like a silver wave of air sweeping across the sky. The multicolored light shield trembled violently for a few times, and a 3-feet-long crack appeared on the shield, forming a narrow gap. When the dazzling light disappeared, the gap did not close. Seeing this, Iwea's lips curled into a gratified smile. The sect leaders, patriarchs, custodians, and elders behind him also wore smiles on their faces and cheered in unison. As for the 1,000 elite disciples, they raised their arms and shouted excitedly. Sect Master Wea is mighty! He broke the protective array and the pillar of heaven's mountain is doomed. As expected of a martial saint expert, the power of this sword is actually so strong. So what if the pillar of heaven's mountain's great protective formation is powerful? It can't stop Sect Master Wea's sword. How ironic! The heavenly dome formation personally laid down by the sword god was actually broken by his own ultimate skill, /. What are you waiting for? Let's go in and destroy the 3 eastern sections. Then, the pillar of heaven's mountain will be ours. And Iwea knew clearly that he had not really broken the heavenly formation. He had only created a temporary gap. After a while, the gap would close automatically. Therefore, he rushed to the gap without hesitation. He turned into a beam of light and went in. The sect masters and sect leaders quickly followed him. They all used secret techniques to shrink their bodies and went through the gap into the protective array. Then, more than 20 guardians and elders entered the gap one by one. After more than 30 experts had entered, the elite disciples of the various sects also flew toward the gap. However, before they could get close, the gap closed quickly. More than 1,000 elite disciples were blocked outside the array. They could only return to the warships and flying boat. And Iwea had expected this outcome, so he wasn't surprised at all. He ordered the sect masters and headmasters, "Tell the disciples to wait outside the formation and be ready to attack at any time. Let's go to the pillar of heaven's mountains to see what's going on." The sect masters and sect leaders hurriedly passed down the order. In a moment, Iwea led more than 30 experts and landed on the Taoist sanctum. Everyone took out their weapons and looked around vigilantly. They were ready to attack at any time. When everyone arrived at the foot of the sword's steel, a dazzling brilliance suddenly flashed in the open space 1,000 feet in front of them. Swoosh! With a flash of colorful light, more than 20 figures of different shapes appeared on the Taoist sanctum. The sudden change startled the experts of the 4 sects and 8 schools. They stopped and pointed their weapons at the newcomers. Their nerves were tense. And Iwea frowned as well. He looked sharply at the crowd and saw many familiar faces. Huanglong Daoist, Tang Zhanlong, the sect masters and sect leaders of the 3 sects and 6 schools, and more than 20 guardians and elders. Seeing this, Iwea's heart skipped a beat and his brows furrowed. Why are the people of the Pillar of Heaven's Mountain with the 3 sects and 6 schools? The 30 or so experts behind him also noticed that something was wrong and realized that the situation was not good. That's not right. Didn't the 3 sects and 6 schools occupy the Pillar of Heaven's Mountain? How could this be? Has the Pillar of Heaven's Mountain surrendered to Tang Zhanlong? No, look at the white-robed young man. He seems to be the leader. Huanglong Daoist and Tang Zhanlong are standing behind him. Who is he? As long as one wasn't a fool, they would know that something was wrong. Many people's attention was focused on Ji Tianqing. They were sizing him up with confusion. And Wuya and the other sect masters also stared at Ji Tianqing with sharp eyes, sizing him up. Seeing Ji Tianqing's face clearly, and Wuya and the other sect masters' faces changed dramatically, and their bodies stiffened on the spot. Everyone's eyes were wide open. Their expressions and eyes were full of horror. It was as if they had seen the most horrible and unbelievable thing. The Supreme Headmasters and Supreme Headmasters, in particular, were filled with shock and fear. Their bodies were shaking uncontrollably. After a long while, everyone came back to their senses, and they all let out low roars and roars. Why does this white-robed young man look so much like that person? It can't be him. He has been dead for thousands of years. He can't be resurrected. How can there be such a similar person in the world? Not only does he look the same, but his eyes and temperament are also the same. It can't be him. It can't be him. And Wuya and the sect masters had seen Kenshin's face in the past. They had a deep impression of Kenshin's power and would never forget it. Even after thousands of years, the memory in the depths of their souls would not be blurred. Now that they saw the sword god arrive in person, everyone's hearts were raised, and they felt reverence from the bottom of their souls. At this moment, Huang Long and Tang Zhanlong opened their mouths at the same time. Their voices were cold and dignified. "How dare you rebel? His Excellency, the Sword God, is here in person. Why don't you kneel down and apologize?" Their voices were mixed with a powerful soul-shocking force, and it shook the souls of numerous experts to the point of trembling, causing them to feel even more terrified and uneasy. Only now did those guardians and elders who were unaware come to a sudden understanding. So that white-robed young man was the legendary sword god. No. Didn't Kenshin die thousands of years ago? How could he be alive now? How could he appear in front of everyone alive? Many guardians and elders came to their senses and had the same thought in their minds. Confusion, uneasiness, worry, and awe filled the experts' hearts with all kinds of emotions. At this time, Wuya stared at Ji Tianqing and asked in a deep voice, "Boy, who are you? Why are you pretending to be Kenshin?" Huanglong Daoist and Tang Zhanlong frowned and sneered. "Pretending? Wuya, you have a rich imagination. It's a pity that you are blind. Today you will die here." Chapter 1904. The crowd's reaction made Wuya's face even gloomier. His whole body was filled with a murderous aura. Laugh? Is it funny? Could it be that you think that by finding someone who looks similar to the sword god, you can intimidate me and save the Pillar of Heaven's mountains from danger? If so, then you are too naive. Wuya gripped his jade flute tightly and said coldly. An invisible murderous aura spread out and covered a radius of 10 miles. Ji Tianqing looked at him indifferently and said slowly, "Do you know why I opened a gap in the array and let you in?" Wuya frowned and sneered, "Ha ha. I was the one who broke the array, and you say you opened it? Brat, don't play tricks in front of this seat. In a moment, this seat will make you kneel down and beg for mercy, living a life worse than death." Ji Tianqing frowned and his eyes grew colder. He said in a low voice, "I was going to give you a chance to kneel and admit your mistake, and maybe I will spare your life. But now it seems that you don't want to cherish this chance?" "Ha ha!" Wuya threw his head back and laughed. His white hair danced in the wind, and his whole body was filled with murderous aura. "Boy, you're too good at pretending. Do you really think you are Kenshin? Do you think I am as stupid as Tang Zhanlong? Do you really think I am a Kenshin? Now I will give you one chance. Kneel and surrender to me, and I will spare your life." Ji Tianqing could see his attitude. Maybe he didn't believe it, or he didn't want to believe it, and he didn't want to give up his plan to take over Sky Pillar Mountain. He didn't want to waste any more words with Wuya. His eyes flashed with pity, and he said in a low voice, "Stubborn fool." As he spoke, He slowly raised his right hand and formed a spell with his 5 fingers. He sent out several rays of golden light into the Taoist field. Suddenly, the heavenly array sped up and its power was raised to the limit. A mighty and invisible force of heaven and earth came down from the sky and pressed down on Wuya and the 30 experts. Boom! Following an earth-shattering explosion, more than 30 powerhouses suddenly suffered a heavy blow, and all of them knelt on the ground. The ground was smashed open by the crowd, causing dust to fly up into the air. The entire mountain peak was trembling. The knees of all the tribulation-passing cultivators were shattered, and dark red blood gushed out from them. Their mouths and noses were also bleeding. Their faces were as pale as paper, and they bowed their heads. No one under the martial saint realm could withstand the suppression of the heavenly array. Everyone's face was full of horror, and their eyes were full of fear. Even the strongest of them, Wuya, was kneeling on one knee, blood dripping from his mouth and nose. However, he held the jade flute in his right hand and inserted it into the stone floor. He tried his best to support his body and not kneel down. Ji Tianxing looked down at the leaders, elders, protectors, and said expressionlessly, "Apart from Wuya, I'll give you 2 choices." He growled and released a sacred and mighty pressure. Like an invisible wind, it swept toward the crowd. All the experts who were enveloped by his pressure couldn't help but tremble in fear. They felt reverence from the bottom of their souls. The expressions of the 30 experts changed dramatically. Some lowered their heads in fear. Some looked at their companions anxiously and whispered to each other. But most of them were looking at Wuya to see how he would react. At this moment, Wuya slowly raised his sleeve and wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth. He ran his magic power and stood up. He stared at Ji Tianxing with sharp eyes and asked in a low voice, "Boy, who the hell are you?" Ji Tianxing ignored him and continued to control the heavenly array to release a powerful suppression force. Huanglong Daoist looked at Wuya with pity and shouted angrily, "Wuya, you are hopeless. Shizuan is merciful and originally wanted to spare your life and give you a chance to redeem yourself through meritorious service. But you ruined that chance with your own hands and pushed yourself into the abyss of death. No one can save you now. Kill yourself to atone for your sins." Taoist Huanglong's solemn tone did not seem to be fake. Wuya's body shook and his eyes were filled with disbelief. "Is he really? Kenshin? That's impossible. That's ridiculous. I won't believe it even if I die. You want me to kill myself? Dream on." Wuya raised his right hand and waved the green jade flute. 2 rays of 5-colored spiritual light were shot toward Ji Tianxing. The 2 rays of spiritual light formed a huge light sword. With the power to pierce through everything, it arrived in front of Ji Tianxing in an instant. Huanglong Daoist and Tang Zhanlong's expressions changed, and they were about to stop it. Ji Tianxing, on the other hand, took a step forward and used his body to collide with the 2-sword light. His expression was indifferent. He ignored the power of the 2 rays of sword light and showed his unparalleled confidence. This scene caused everyone present to widen their eyes and reveal a look of shock. Even Huanglong Daoist and Tang Zhanlong could not believe that Ji Tianxing would take the attack of a martial sage. That was crazy. Bang! Bang! 2 muffled sounds burst out at the same time. The 2 rays of 5-colored sword light hit Ji Tianxing squarely. But his body became translucent, as if he had merged with heaven and earth. Even his aura became illusory. The 2 sword lights collapsed on the spot, exploding into fragments that filled the sky and splashed out in all directions. But he was not hurt at all. He did not even take half a step back. Everyone was stunned. They were completely dumbfounded. Countless experts widened their eyes and opened their mouths, exclaiming in disbelief. Even Wuya was stunned for a moment and his eyes widened in horror. At the same time, Ji Tianxing pinched his fingers and drew golden arcs in the air to form a mysterious seal. Wuya, the star cut you've learned from me is just the tip of the iceberg. Now I'll show you what the real star cut is." As his voice trailed off, a huge star seal had been formed. Immediately, countless rays of light streaked across the sky and turned into dazzling silver starlight, pouring into the seal. Even Ji Tianqing's palm surged with starry divine fire and enveloped the seal. In the next moment, the huge seal condensed into a huge star sword that was hundreds of feet long. With endless power, it slashed toward Wuya. From the time Ji Tianqing cast the spell to the time the star sword slashed out, it was only the blink of an eye. He was 10 times faster than Wuya. What was more terrifying was that he could draw the power of the stars and make them fall like meteors. This was the power of a martial god.